I discovered my wife's infidelity after my cancer diagnosis, rewrote my will for my children, and decided to hide my illness from her. On November 5th, I got the news I had been most afraid of: aggressive stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which was confirmed by every test. This will essentially be my last holiday season. I have a strange feeling of acceptance, oddly enough. My loved ones will be taken care of, and I have had a happy life. I hadn't told my wife Emily about the test since I'm a naturally private person. Until I received conclusive answers, I didn't want to worry her. I came home early so I could have the talk I needed. I didn't want to deal with this over the phone or over text message. My life changed in a lot of ways that day, as you might have expected given that I'm sharing this now. As I arrived at the driveway, I noticed that one of my business partner's gaudy, expensive vehicle was parked there, complete with his personalized license plate. This was very odd. When I used my phone to access our home security system, I discovered that it was in private mode and not recording. I made the decision to ignore it and drove away to our rural property in order to get my mind straight. Our security system is mostly for protection, and I hardly check it unless there's a specific cause. But I also find it relaxing to watch storms approach and to monitor the wildlife on the outside cams. I have a second video recorder set up for my personal amusement in order to store the material locally, which is inaccessible from my phone. I checked the second server and opened my laptop when I got to the country house to confirm what my gut was already telling me. As expected, Emily and James, my coworker, were in the living room, dancing, drinking wine, and then going upstairs to the bedroom. Since the microphone recorded their actions after they left the camera's field of view, it appears that they left the doors open. I wanted to know the truth because I only have a short time left, but I also didn't want the drama of a fight and divorce. I lost all the love and commitment I had for her that day, so feel free to call me a coward. I know it's not my fault, but I felt every feeling you could imagine. I've been a loyal, caring, and watchful wife. I'm now concentrating on who I am and what I value most. I spoke with my lawyer, and we went over my prenuptial agreement and will. After I gave him the rundown, we got to work figuring out how long and how much of this affair had been going on. We came to the disturbing conclusion that either I never really knew the woman I had been with for more than 20 years, or something had changed drastically in her. I'm not telling Emily or my kids anything right now. I have children from a prior relationship, but we never had children together. In order to give my kids and grandkids one final holiday memory with me, I'm going to put on a brave front and get through the holidays. In addition to trying to be a loving husband, I'll be the devoted father and grandfather. For those who are curious, Emily's affair partner, James, is a widower who hasn't been married again. I don't combine friendship and business, thus he is a business partner but not a personal friend. Jessica, the mother of my twins, made the decision to marry me, and at the time, I agreed that it was the appropriate one. When the children were 7 years old, Jessica, the mother of my children, wed a lovely man named Michael. Michael and Jessica never had kids together. I've been actively involved with the kids ever since I got my act together when they were 3 years old. At that point, I began to develop into the father I had always desired. Michael, Jessica, and I are all in our late 50s. James is in his early 50s, while Emily is about 55. Both Emily and I are in our first marriage. We were married when we were in our early 30s. Update. When the twins were born, Jessica, my ex, and I were still pretty young. Even though they came as a complete surprise, we made the most of it. I'm grateful for the life I've lived and the people I've loved as I approach my last days. They cherish these final times and keep my family near. All of the grandchildren are teenagers or older, and the twins are now in their 30s. Christmas is celebrated for 10 days every year. Christmas Eve to January 2nd is when we spend time at the farm. After everyone has arrived, we all gather to cut down a tree, then we cook, decorate, play games, and celebrate as a family. Since I purchased the property, Laura and her husband John have continued this custom. I'm still determined to keep my diagnosis a secret until after the year ends. Laura wouldn't be able to hide it if I told her, and I don't want to put John in a situation where he has to tell his wife a lie. I want the week to be enjoyable for the children and grandchildren. In a few weeks, we'll have plenty of time to prepare and grieve. In the long run, Emily's attendance this week will only be a small detail. To be honest, I don't give a damn about her nearly as much as I do about the other members of the family. It's an unusual financial scenario. After we were both financially and professionally established, Emily and I met and were married. She had 2 inheritances in a trust, a solid pension, and a good job. At her urging, we decided early on not to tell each other our full net worth. Additionally, at her request, we have a prenuptial agreement that states that any assets or trusts that existed before to the marriage as well as any income derived from them, are not regarded as marital property. In addition to covering travel, food and petrol, I also supplied both properties, housing, and utilities. She basically had my full backing, and she spent all of her money and resources on herself. She purchased cosmetic surgery, clothing, a car and personal trips. She has proven to be pretty disagreeable on the inside, despite her stunning exterior. I announced my retirement from the organization where I worked a few days after receiving my diagnosis. Now that I knew, I saw that Emily was a little uneasy. Since I'd be around more frequently, I can guess why. My last day of work is tomorrow, after which I'll be concentrating on spending time with my family. I don't know if Emily and James have had any more activities, but I suppose they have since I provided my lawyer access to the camera server information and allowed him to use it from his office. I don't give a damn now. James is a huge letdown, and I'm aware of my identity and value. I am not as ostentatious as James. In the winter, I prefer wearing jeans, t-shirts, and coveralls, and I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck. I am positive that James is not quite as wealthy as Emily believes him to be. How can I tell? I receive quarterly financial reports because the trust has invested in his company. My accountants and I are the only ones who know how much I have. However, let's assume that over the past 28 years, the trust has been increasing. I lead a simple life and my great-great-grandchildren have enough money to enjoy the farm and receive an education. Emily's reckoning will come when she recognizes what she's lost. I simply won't live to witness it. December was a very busy month. These past 2 weekends, we went on our customary social rounds. James attended one of the gatherings. It was difficult not to watch him and Emily. They probably didn't notice. I found it easier to maintain my composure because I'm so busy finishing things at work. Emily hasn't said anything that would make me think she's aware that I'm aware. I still share a bed with her, something I'm not proud of. Recently, I've been self-centered with her. She seems to have been using me for the majority of this year, yet I still feel like I'm taking advantage of her. Many of you have portrayed myself as honorable, but I'm not. I detest this little bit of dishonesty. Emily won't get everything, so don't stress about it. The trust is well cared for. Thanks to your feedback, I've taken precautions in case I pass away suddenly or if my health deteriorates sooner than predicted. When necessary, I have also arranged for in-home care. I will not be cared for by Emily. The lawyer will let Laura, John, and the children know if I become incompetent, and Emily will not be allowed to see me. Important papers, jewelry, and other necessities have all been relocated to a safe place. I've finally started writing letters to Emily and every member of the family. These have proven more difficult than I thought. Update: the mission has been completed. I've made it to 2024 and we had a fantastic holiday week free of trouble. I apologize in advance, but I find that laughing about my illness helps me deal with it. Recently, I've seen that I'm acting a little selfishly. I just have a few updates because everyone left yesterday afternoon. My week with my family is something I should treasure, therefore I won't discuss it. This week's observations regarding Emily. I genuinely believe that this is the first time she has betrayed me. She looked to suffer from spending the entire week with all of us. It's funny how someone's behavior makes more sense when you know something about them. The fact that she kept her phone a secret and frequently left our family get-togethers to get some air. The nicest part was when one of the grandchildren requested to accompany Mom when she had to run into town. She performed nearly ridiculous mental acrobatics to resist taking the grandchild. I must admit that I asked, why not? In order to play along. Thus the affair is still going on. Now that I'm retired, she has been inquiring about my daily or weekly plans. After telling her, I inquire about her plans. To tease her, I'll propose that we have lunch later this week because I'll be in the same vicinity. A cheater's worst adversary is uncertainty. I had a meeting with my lawyer this morning. I requested him to draft documents after making some decisions. I signed a new permanent will in place of my temporary one so it shouldn't need to be changed again. I had him draft divorce paperwork in anticipation of it all blowing out. She only receives 15% of our joint assets, such as furniture and housewares, according to the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of the affair. I maintain whatever I bought with my own money, including my retirement accounts and liquid assets. She must pay alimony if I insist on it. I have a folder including all of our evidence of the affair, which I have signed and am keeping in case I need it. By selling my debt to the trust, I gave the trustees permission to exchange it for stock in James's business. In relation to the trust, I have made a decision on its management. I'm going to drop one trustee. The 4 grandchildren will make up the remaining trusteeship, with the twins receiving the majority. John and Laura will serve as stand-ins for the grandchildren. The trusteeship will pass from Laura and John to each grandchild when they become 21. Laura receives the additional portion if any is left over. Next week, Laura, John, and the children will meet with me. I'll tell them everything I know. They will want to know why I'm doing this and will need to sign documents. My liquid assets, personal property, and the funds from James's loan will make up my personal value after this is over. In the worst situation, Emily's share of the trust's assets and worth will be minimal. I'll distribute the few personal belongings I wish to give to the children and grandchildren over the course of the upcoming weeks. My lawyer already has access to those in a secure area. A few of you made remarks on my health. I'm not resisting this, to be clear. I'm not experiencing any negative side effects from any treatments because I'm letting nature take its course. The family also observed that I was getting weary more readily. I dismissed it as simply growing older. The cough that started it all is still with me. My lung tumors were the cause of the diagnosis. I dismissed it as a persistent cough from a previous illness. When other problems start to surface, I anticipate things going south rather quickly, but by then, everyone will be aware. I want to be with the family as much as I can. With all of their various responsibilities, a big vacation would be difficult, which is why I found this week to be so crucial. It was the final time I could spend a lot of time with them all. We'll see, but I'm considering taking a quick trip for myself. I want to spend a day with every child and grandchild individually. That is my next objective. Update: the twins, Laura, John, my lawyer, and a notary came to my farm today. I've finished the things I needed to, and this process has gone about as smoothly as it could have. The family is understandably upset. The tension in the room was evident when everyone came and saw my lawyer and the notary. I requested that they simply sit and listen to me, and then sign the documents once I was done. I would respond to all of their inquiries after signing the paperwork. Everyone is aware of the trust. I informed them that it was time for me to give them authority over the trust. I explained how crucial the trust had been to my life, why I had established it, and how we had decided to keep it apart from my marriage to Emily. Additionally, I included instructions on how I wanted the trust to be used and managed. We clarified that the twins and the grandchildren would share the trust, with Laura and John serving as stand-ins for the grandchildren until they are all 21 years old. They signed the forms and had them notarized, which demonstrated their confidence in me. Following that, copies were compiled, and I fired the notary and my attorney. I thanked them for coming out on a Sunday after seeing them out. As usual, they were both polite. They were all silent when I went back to the dining room, which was also being used as a conference room. The first person to break the hush was my daughter. It was not so much a question as a stream of thought. I began by talking about my health as soon as she paused. I described my diagnosis. I heard them planning how we were going to combat this. I stopped them right here. After outlining the likelihood and letting them know that I had already had a second opinion, I informed them of what you are all well aware. I will not be seeking treatment. I will allow nature to do its thing. We argued for the next hour or an hour and a half. Laura had to go fetch my daughter after she fled the room many times. My son John and I had a heart-to-heart while they were away. They can relate to my perspective. They understand, even if they disagree. Everyone agrees that once things settle down, Laura and my daughter will change their minds. When did I find out? That was the next question I knew was coming. I informed them. After that, there was more anguish and rage. I clarified that I was not a walking corpse and that I wanted one more holiday week. I was self-centered. After the holidays, I wanted my diagnosis to be made public. For the rest of their lives, I didn't want it to ruin their vacations. Sensing there was more, my daughter started investigating me. Until everything was out, she would not leave the room. Why in the world hadn't Emily told her, she asked. I dropped the final bombshell at that point. I explained to them what I had done in my initial post. For the first time, I could actually see my daughter's eyes blaze with rage. I then informed them that Emily is still unaware that I'm aware of it. I suppose you all prepared me effectively since I addressed the schemes and plans they had in mind, scenarios you all suggested, and I responded to the same questions. I assured them that I valued them far more than Emily in the end. I simply want to be at peace and not worry about Emily for the rest of my life. During the holiday week, I had to defend what I had done. They also pieced together her going outside to breathe and her decision to go into town without the grandchild. They were concerned that I was doing this by myself. I informed them that I have pals on social media that support me throughout my darkest moments. I still want this space for me, but I won't tell them where or how. They'll find out later. We've been discussing intermittently as a group for a few hours, and the emotions were pretty raw. However, I informed them that I had to return and discuss the trust. They are aware that the trust will be highly beneficial in preventing Emily from gaining access to my hard-earned money. She didn't attend this meeting because it protects them. Having stated that, I had to disclose the trust's finances. They all probably thought of the trust as a way to avoid paying taxes or as a way to safeguard assets in a marriage if the children are from a different woman. They weren't ready for me to give them the money. The audience became quiet as I began to review the balance sheets and assets. Then came the inevitable question. Why did you have this much after all those years of hard work? I gave them my personal financial theory, which they had heard a lot of times and had absorbed. However, I informed them that I had been living off the trust for years. I trusted them enough to send them to college. With that faith, I set aside time in my life for them. And because of that trust, I was able to work for a non-profit organization essentially for nothing. If I were to leave them and their kids with one example, it would be to utilize this trust to better the lives of others, not simply to sometimes write a check to a charity, but to work for a cause they support. By educating others and fostering relationships, I've achieved far more in my years with this nonprofit than I ever could have with a check alone. I'm not pleased that I was responsible for so many positive and negative changes in everyone's lives around that table today. Although everything didn't go as planned, it's finished. They are fully aware of it. I pleaded with them to let me deal with Emily and to keep the trust a secret. For the time being, we'll maintain the status quo, but when I recover, things will be different. They all concurred. Over the course of the following few hours, we divided into smaller groups, spoke, cried, laughed and prepared a supper. I expect the twins to return, but they all left an hour ago. I love my two in-laws very much, and I know they'll tell their spouses what's going on. That's just the way they are. I was aware that this was the last peaceful evening I would have. Even though I feel like a weight has been lifted, concern has taken its place. A brief update is provided. One of Emily's pals paid me a visit, which caught me off guard. Her name is Carol, and she is roughly Emily's age. Last week, she went out with Emily for a girls' night out. The girls actually spent the evening at Carol's place. If you have read my remarks, you are aware that Emily used a ride-sharing service and returned home pretty drunk last week. Emily and Carol have been friends for a long time, but I suppose that after more than 20 years of marriage, Emily has forgotten that I introduced them. My folks were friends with Carol's parents. I suppose Emily's instability has been exacerbated by my unpredictable behavior, and last week's girls' night was a tipping point for her. She became so drunk that she told Carol about her romance. Carol reportedly urged her to stop talking, but she persisted. She continued to provide more and more information, which infuriated Carol. Emily continued to lay forth an endless stream of details while attempting to explain her behavior in response to Carol's constant criticism. The following day, Carol contacted Emily. Emily apparently had no recollection of the previous evening. Carol summed up Emily's confession, but Emily denied having an affair outright, saying Carol was wrong and that she didn't say such things. Emily was told by Carol that she was full of lies, and she was given a week to come clean or else she would tell me directly. Carol paid me a visit over coffee since Emily said she had said nothing. Emily gave me a condensed version of her confession. I surprised Carol by informing her that I already knew, even though she anticipated me to be distraught. When Emily made this confession, I asked her if anyone else was present. The only other person in the house was Carol. If Carol had told anyone else, I inquired. She was angered by that. Before telling me, she assured me she wouldn't spread such a thing. I apologized and clarified that adding more people would make my preparations more difficult because I had my own schedule for handling Emily. Carol understood. As a favor, I begged her to keep it a secret from everyone and to give Emily the impression that she believed her. Carol felt the second section didn't feel right, but she did agree with my original request. I assured her that I would be all right and begged her to try. Carol stated I only needed to ask if I needed anything else. When Carol learns about my condition, I'll have to apologize again, but I'll take care of it another day. I will thus confront Emily tomorrow. I'm going to calmly tell her what I know about my condition and how I'm going to live the rest of my life without her on our regular date night tomorrow. I hope there won't be much drama because it's public. After dessert, I'm going to approach her. I'll tell her what I know and request that she not get in touch with my family or me. Let's see how it turns out. According to Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yes, not all plans work out the way you had hoped, and mine is no exception. Allow me to lay out my plan for you. Emily and I usually go to the same restaurant for our weekly date night. We have a regular table because we have been visiting there for so long. It's at the back, away from the lively atmosphere beside the bar, but still open to the public. I made the decision to confront her here. After dessert, I intended to do it. I made accommodations for my lawyer and his spouse at the same time. Before we started, I paid the waiter, who has been serving us for years, for both of our meals. After I left, Carol was available to assist Emily. I intended to discuss our relationship as we finished the meal. After recording it, I intended to approach her, explain how I found out about the affair, let her know I was diagnosed, and lay out my future plan. I would write a letter to her requesting that she not come to the farm or get in touch with my family. They would witness the letter. Along with the divorce papers, I would hand her a briefcase full of supporting documentation before getting up and leaving. I thought she would keep quiet to preserve her social standing. Yes, I did videotape the exchange. She raved about our excellent teamwork and the wonderful relationship we had developed over the years. I questioned her about my treatment of her, whether I had ever mistreated her, etc. Certainly not, she said. I then questioned her about her infidelity. She claimed that although she was unaware of what Carol had told me, Carol was mistaken. I informed her that I knew before Carol did. Emily was obviously rattled at that point, and I believe everything she had prepared to respond to this talk vanished. Her face's color also changed. What? Was the only thing she could ask. She nodded in agreement when I requested her to give me some uninterrupted time to do this. Her once self-assured and arrogant demeanor changed to one of deer in the headlights. She was just able to nod. I described how after my doctor's appointment I hurried home to have the most challenging conversation with the one person I wanted to talk to. I clarified that I saw his car when I pulled up. After that, I noticed that the cameras were in privacy mode. I made the decision to visit the farm. She nearly cut me off when I reminded her that I still had film, but I simply raised my hand to remind her to wait. I informed her of my diagnosis and my intention to not battle the illness. I became enraged when I noticed the anguish in her eyes. How could she be sad about me? But I took a step ahead. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I had already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kid seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I'd already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kid seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The meeting took place this morning. I don't know why, perhaps to limit the harm, but Emily picked Carol, and I went with my daughter. In order to prevent this from happening again, I wanted Emily to feel as comfortable as possible. I had a clear direction and aim going into the meeting. To get rid of Emily. The conference proceeded according to plan. Emily sought to downplay the affair while crying and apologizing. I refused to put up with it. I explained that she needed to come to terms with the fact that she would have a home to reside until my death. The trustees would make the decision regarding the house after my passing. I clarified that she would not get any money from my estate or the trust, but she would be okay since she has her trust and her 6-figure pension. "Why won't you fight for me or us?" she said, and I have to vent about it. "I just don't care about you or us anymore," was my response to her, even though I nearly lost my anger. She was kind of wrecked by that. This is where I vent my rage. This is what a self-centered cheater thinks. They only consider themselves. They believe they are valuable enough in the eyes of the person they have destroyed to be worth fighting for. Although she didn't want them in retrospect, she received the answers she requested. Another meeting is not something I want. I believe that holding more meetings only serves to divert my attention from my goals. After leaving with Emily, Carol returned a few hours later. I spoke with her briefly. The trustees reportedly informed the affair partner that they would be converting the loan into shares in his business, and since the trust will own the bulk of the shares, they are requesting a thorough forensic audit. With her MBA, my daughter isn't wasting any time. I suppose Emily recognized what I had already thought when she turned to him for solace. He was exploiting her to try to get her to buy the debt from me. I suspected he was up to something because of several casual remarks in the recordings. The affair partner now knows that I sold the debt to the trust after the paperwork was filed, and since Emily is no longer in my life, he can no longer utilize her. He informed her. It seems that Emily also told Carol that she would only have her pension income going forward because her trust had run out. Compared to me, she thought living with the affair partner was more glamorous. She genuinely believes that his wealth surpasses mine. While my husband played on his farm, drove an old truck, and we traveled economy class, he travels in first class, drives lovely cars, and dines at upscale restaurants. When he declared his unwavering love and desire to marry her, she was preparing to file for divorce. I find it disgusting that she is so shallow and greedy. Although I won't be able to see it, I anticipate that my family will inform her of my value when I pass away. I'm so relieved that her actual nature has come to light so that I can deal with her and protect my family. Then Carol surprised me by doing something very different. Since I'm no longer burdened, she advised me to call her if I need company. Why would she or any woman want to spend time with me given my diagnosis? I questioned her. Nothing long-term exists. She retorted that any divorced or widowed lady would be eager to spend what time she had left with me, even if Emily was naive and unaware of what she had. She claimed that I'm a great man and that she would treasure any time spent with me. She even made a joke about how many women would be lining up to call me, so she might as well be first in line. She replied, "But most people won't know Emily and I are separated. Emily doesn't want the social groups to know, but she and Laura will make sure her tale is heard," she added. Being courteous, I promised to inform her. She kissed me on the cheek and grinned. After she departed, I gave it some thinking, but I'm fairly certain that I don't want that hassle in my life at this time. These are the highlights, although I left a lot out. It has been a roller coaster, but I'm doing fine. I just need some quiet time for a few days. My condition and the dissolution of my marriage will soon be known to the social circles. There will be a never-ending flow of well wishes for me. I didn't want to be treated differently, but I knew I couldn't put it off indefinitely. But life happens as it does. Update. To start, I'm doing fine. I'm still above ground and warmer than normal. Being on my feet every day is a blessing. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable and my coughing has gotten a little worse. I see that it's getting easier for me to wind up. But all in all, this week has been fantastic. First, let's talk about Emily. She's disappeared. Her standing in the community has quickly and severely collapsed. She was respectfully asked to step down from all of her leadership positions after it was made public. She has been severely criticized by the majority of her circle, who have even asked her directly if she pursued their husbands. She has made several attempts to contact me, but I have not answered. I urged the individual to tell her that I had stated what I needed to say and that I knew what I needed to know, even if there were a few efforts made through proxies. It doesn't really matter to me if she needs closure. Why should her self-centered need for that concern me? She understands my feelings. I even shared some of the affair's specifics with her. At least 6 months have passed since it began. They traveled together 3 times. Once as newlyweds, once as a couple commemorating their 20th wedding anniversary, and once as a couple who met on vacation and stayed at the same hotel. Role-playing must have been an element of their relationship. She used our home because she felt at ease there and because it is tucked away from the road, making it impossible for onlookers to see the automobiles in the driveway. She even purchased a second vehicle for herself and kept it in a local parking garage. In order for no one to recognize her car when she traveled to the affair partner's residence, it seems that she switched cars. Perhaps in order to avoid me catching her, she was rather worried about how people in her social circle would perceive this. The amount of work she put into the affair is evident from her acts alone. All of these endeavors help me to firmly establish my feelings and my approach to handling the affair. I don't regret anything I've done. My unpredictable nature was only partially to blame for the inebriated revelation to Carol. It seems that he began to distance himself from Emily as soon as he received the news that I was selling the affair partner's debt to the trust. She must have gotten drunk and vented to Carol because she was under pressure to avoid being caught and since her affair partner was no longer interested in her. You are aware of what follows. I think the affair partner's motivations for getting involved in the affair were very obvious. Emily is made even more pitiful by this, which in no way excuses her. The affair partner apparently needed Emily's assistance with his loan, while Emily desired a more opulent lifestyle with his wealth. It's fascinating how unattractive individuals are drawn to one another. We can find better mates if all of us nice folks just let the vile people get together. I apologize to those who strive on reconciliation out of dedication. It was not for me. My daughter's goals have angered the affair partner. In court, he seems to be attempting to stop her. More money is all he stands to lose. Rumor has it that he has attempted to gather funds from other investors in order to repay the loan, but sadly for him, word of his conduct has already begun to spread among my business associates. Do you recall that you should invest in people rather than businesses? Well, not many people are interested in investing in him. I'm not sure what my daughter has in store for his business, but she will put in a lot of effort to make sure it survives, just for the people who work there. I believe she is concerned that the partner in the affair may have something to conceal in the company's records. I hope it's something that can be fixed for the benefit of the staff. It has been wonderful spending time with family. This week, my family and I attended a high school basketball game. I organized a poker night as well, and it went really well. At the game were my son, my grandson, and a few old friends. The grandson witnessed how traditional men spent a night together, sitting around sharing stories. I'm hoping to add a couple more of these. This week, our family has eaten together 3 times. One evening, Carol did visit and bring food. I kept her at a distance as we conversed and ate. I'm still hesitant to let her in. Farm chores provide me comfort. I assist with equipment maintenance, check on the staff and animals, and occasionally drive the fences. I feel at ease knowing that this farm will remain in the family and continue to operate. I will always have a piece of myself. Many of my friends and acquaintances have paid me a visit. I believe this is what someone meant when they spoke of a living wake. I'm urging everyone to visit me outside. Even if it might be our last time together, I like spending time with these people. I was in the hospital for a few days, but I'm home now. I was taken to the emergency room after they discovered me breathing but unconscious. Despite my do not resuscitate order, I never passed away. I have always detested hospitals, and now that I have been diagnosed, I detest them much more. I don't wish to pass away there. I've spent some time at home. I'm unable to drive off the farm anymore. I'm determined to continue performing my duties and taking in the sunrise and sunset for as long as possible, even though they really don't want me to drive on the property. I also employ full-time home health aides, or babysitters as I refer to them, but I won't argue with the family about that. Basically, until I woke up in the hospital, I had no memory of anything. Carol and the majority of my family were present. By that point, I was stable, and the physicians only wanted to keep an eye on me for a day or two while, of course, doing more tests just to be sure. Carol, Laura, or my twins were with me nearly all the time. On one occasion, I woke up alone in my room with Emily by my side. She must have played the wife card on a duty nurse who was unaware that she should be denied entry. She was playing the kind and loyal wife, but I was exhausted. I have no idea why. I withdrew when I noticed she was caressing my head and holding my hand. She was wounded. She then began a new refrain in which she apologized profusely, claimed she was attempting to take advantage of him, and that she didn't mean anything she said to him. I did nothing but sit there. She was furious by this. She insisted that I speak with her. The nurse noticed her because she was just loud enough. Emily's behavior and my uneasiness were observed by the nurse. The nurse was slick. She wanted to do some checks, so she instructed Emily to wait outside. The nurse asked me whether I was all right when Emily left the room and the door was shut. I informed her that there should be notes stating Emily is not permitted because she was my ex-wife. After expressing regret, the nurse asked how she might help me feel less stressed. She should phone my emergency contacts, I asked. Carol and Laura, my daughter, entered the room after around 45 minutes. Emily had returned by that point and was still babbling, albeit quietly. Emily knew she had to go as soon as she saw them. I whispered to her to leave. She didn't deserve to cause a spectacle for any of the other patients. I told her to get over her self-centered thoughts and just go. She gave me a short peck on the forehead before leaving, which I really appreciate. For the sake of the other patient's peace, I backed down a little, but whatever. I received a lot of apology from the women in my life. Since they have their own lives, I can't really be angry with them. They all came up with a way to guarantee that I'm always accompanied. I'm never by myself in the house because they switch shifts. Carol and my daughter have been especially watchful. To keep an eye on who enters and exits the residence, they even built a security system. Even with all the craziness, I occasionally find some serenity by listening to the animals at dusk, seeing the sunset over the fields, and knowing that I've done everything I can to make things right before my time comes. I am appreciative of my family and friends' love and support. Emily's intrusion was distressing, but it strengthened my resolve to cut all ties with her. Now, I'm concentrating on the time I have left and creating memories with the people who are most important to me. To ensure that I would never be left alone again, they planned shifts. My daughter probably expressed her gratitude to the nurse for summoning them and her ire at the staff for allowing Emily to enter despite clear orders to the contrary. This incident just serves to highlight Emily's tendency to grasp at anything, much like a drowning person. She doesn't think I'm unique. She only views me as a tool to help her stay afloat. Every time I interact with Emily, I am struck by how much more sinister and evil her soul is. The partner in the affair is still just as much of a jackass as he was. In conversations with my daughter, his accounting department essentially provided her the full picture since they know where the wind is blowing. The affair partner has not engaged in any illegal activity related to his business. He was obviously abusing every benefit and legal loophole to boost his income over his base wage at the expense of the company's bottom line. He will be extremely irritated when my daughter assumes leadership because he will see a 60% decrease in the company's value to him. His flamboyant lifestyle is going to face a brick wall because I have a suspicion that she may simply terminate him and demote him to a silent minority owner position. Although he has threatened legal action, he has not yet taken any concrete steps. His reputation and credit are severely damaged, in my opinion. Carol is now a more enduring presence in my life. I must admit that I enjoy the company and friendship. Perhaps she is exhausting me. Several days a week, she has been staying over. I'm hoping to recover as quickly as possible, but I'll need to rely more on other people now that I can't drive. I have never been in this situation before. Carol has volunteered enthusiastically to help me in this area, and before you ask, no, we are only sitting next to one other. This evening, it's time to unwind and begin dinner. I want to thank everyone once more for their support. Your messages mean a lot to me, and I will make an effort to go back and reply to them all. Update. I regret to inform everyone that my father passed away last week. He asked me to give you your letter from him, among other things. You are aware that my time here is coming to an end if you are reading this letter. I made movies and wrote letters to every member of my family, as many of you suggested. That made me decide that I should write one last letter. To all of you, that letter is addressed. I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their suggestions and support. I have valued this brief period of life greatly, and my family will undoubtedly value it long after I am gone. That final Christmas week spent with my family was my last present to myself and to you. I would have had to turn to my family if I didn't have a place to vent and get support, which would have meant giving up on my objective. It may not be a present to my family now, but it will be in the future. The amount of fun I had creating those short flicks is beyond words. Thanks to all of you, my family will have another little piece of me. Without your advice and support, I never would have made any of those goofy little videos. To be honest, I never would have considered it. For all of you, I do have one request. My family will experience a range of emotions. I am aware that you all want a resolution, which is why I put my tale out there. Please refrain from making too many demands for updates and give my family time to grieve. I have requested that they provide you with this letter and, if possible, a final update on Emily. It is up to them to make that last update. Please be patient, everyone. Lastly, from the great beyond, I send you my best wishes and all the love I can provide. Keep in mind that nobody can guarantee tomorrow. Recognize the value of life and savor each moment. Treat yourself and those around you with kindness. I pray none of you have to follow in my father's footsteps, but if you do, know that I will do everything in my power to support you. Keep in mind that you are all really valuable. Nobody should ever tell you otherwise. From wherever I wind up, I'll give as many virtual hugs as I can. Thank you is all I have right now, yet it frequently feels so insufficient. I appreciate everything you've done. I hope that we will cross paths again in the hereafter, but not too soon. To be clear, I am the daughter of the individual who sent the letter in the last update, whom some of you believe to be my brother. In fact, it was me. I'm happy Dad left you all this letter so he could express his thoughts. In terms of Dad's death, he did not endure the same level of suffering as others who would have had his illness. I find solace in the fact that he passed away peacefully while he was sleeping. In keeping with his character, he had scheduled an autopsy in advance to make sure Emily couldn't use any aspect of his illness or demise to challenge his wishes. He had a knack for making plans for everything. I find comfort in the knowledge that there was some mercy at the end, even though it turns out that he died of a heart attack. He was cremated as he requested. While the remainder were scattered during the spring planting, some of his ashes were interred with a monument in an ancient farm cemetery. His desire to be a part of the land he loved so much was fulfilled. Emily wasn't there when we had the memorial on the farm. Security had been set up by the funeral home to make sure she couldn't go. For years, Dad had been trying to get us to move to the farm. When he retired, he even planned out home sites in the hopes that we would all move there. He had been made fun of, but we didn't take his suggestion seriously. In retrospect, I regret giving her such sway. My brother and his wife, along with my husband and I, will be relocating to the farm beginning this year. We have chosen a stunning location. At our insistence, Mom and Tom will move into Dad's home. We should all be closer together. It just feels right. Regarding Emily, witnessing her world fall apart has taught me what it really means to be a pariah. Her personality has entirely changed, and she appears to have aged 20 years in just a few months. She challenged the trust assignment and the will, but those issues were promptly settled, and she was unsuccessful. Although Dad had already given away the things he desired, she did receive their joint assets. The main problem was that she couldn't claim the house in town, which Dad had owned before they were married. She pleaded with us to give it to her. In one of the most fulfilling moments of my life, I promised her the house if she returned to using her maiden name as her last name. She accepted the offer even though the house is worth much less than the happiness she would get from removing her father's last name. I anticipate her selling the house and moving out. I don't really care, but I hope our partner has learned a valuable lesson in life. The company is in the process of rebuilding, and we have selected a new CEO. Carol received a single trust share. As Dad would have wished, we will look after her. Because of what she did for our dad, she has been a pillar of our family and will always be regarded as such. Our last update was in 2024. I am quite saddened by the fact that this will be the first year of my life without my father. I wanted to swing by and update everyone on the situation with my father's family. We celebrated our week-long holiday custom, which my father loved very much, as you are already aware. The week was excellent, if bittersweet. Dad was successful in uniting Carol and the rest of the family. We cherish her romantic, if you will, time spent with my father during his most trying times. He left one last gift for each of us, along with messages for the entire year. They moved us to tears and were so considerate. He gave Carol one final task, but I anticipate that there will be letters for the grandchildren at all of their significant occasions. The first occurred at a high school graduation last spring. This year, the home's construction is moving forward. I began to understand what Dad cherished about this farm, the seasons and the life cycles that exist here. I now have a better understanding of his choices from the previous year. Even while I still disagree with some things, I now have a greater understanding. Not as fervently as he did in the end, but it's just another barrier between us. I also began to observe the sunrises and sunsets at Dad's sites. Lisa has had a difficult existence. She had a stroke in the autumn. She survived since it was discovered in a timely manner. She is still undergoing rehabilitation in a care facility. Although she can now speak in a basic way, she still finds it difficult. She is still working on getting back to walking. She still has a long way to go. Her social circles have shown some sympathy for her health problems. Even the grandchildren of Mom, Tom and Dad have set aside their suffering to see her. I may never be a really philanthropic person. About the affair partner, I don't know a lot. He has vanished from my professional network. All I know is that a bankruptcy law firm did send an inquiry letter to the corporation. We haven't yet seen any formal filings. In terms of the business, it is profitable even without his financial support and direction. Every employee received a handsome bonus, and we controlled the debt. We are now closer because of Dad's last presence and his kind writings. By continuing to live on the farm and treasure the memories Dad left us, we continue to uphold his legacy. Every sunrise and sunset we witness from his favorite locations reflects his influence. In the place he cherished, his soul endures. I appreciate everyone's help along the way. Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my dad after years of being blamed for my mom's death and refusing to pay his rent? Since the day I was born, my life has been challenging. You see, my mother died in the hospital while giving birth to me. After that, I was raised by my father, who somehow held me, a physical baby, responsible for his wife's premature passing. Not a day went by during my upbringing in our home without my dad reminding me, in his own cruel manner, that I was the reason my mother disappeared. He would never stop telling me that he never truly wanted me and that my birth had taken away the person he loved the most. He would remind me that I had to work hard and live up to the enormous price my life had paid. If not, my mother's passing would have been pointless. Hearing those cruel remarks as a child was terrible, as you may understand. I was too young to completely comprehend the intricacies of wrath, sorrow and sadness. I also needed my mother, but she was no longer with me, and the only parent I had left acted as though I were the issue. Instead of protecting me, guiding me, and providing me with comfort, my father became the one who never stopped reminding me that I was not welcome in his life and that my very presence was a curse. It was quite challenging to grow up in that setting. I frequently felt bad just for breathing and existing. At times, I longed to speak with him and express how wounded I was by his remarks and how they made me feel as though I didn't belong, even in my own house. But I didn't speak because of fear. I was greeted with greater resentment and rage the few times I tried to speak up. The outcome was a childhood characterized by a strong feeling of isolation and loneliness. I felt like I was always on edge, trying to prevent my dad from being even more resentful of me, while other children had parents that supported them, consoled them when they were depressed and made them feel comfortable. The existence of so much resentment and hate toward that aspect of myself that I couldn't alter, the mere fact that I was alive, was just as painful as the absence of love. I made an effort to comprehend my dad's suffering in spite of everything. I was aware that Dad had been devastated by the loss of my mother and that he had never really recovered. However, that didn't make it any simpler to live with the consequences of his statements. As a young child, I was attempting to figure out where I belonged in a world that frequently seemed unfriendly and chilly. I still secretly yearned for his acceptance, love and approval in spite of all the hurt. Despite everything, I always hoped to somehow make my dad proud. Every time I brought home a report card with decent scores, I recall the excitement I felt, hoping that perhaps this time would be different. Excited to show him what I had done, I would approach him in the hopes of receiving a grin or a supportive remark, anything that would give me the impression that I was enough in his eyes. However, it was always the same. He would groan, hardly look at my grades, and advise me to keep working harder at my studies because they were still not good enough. He would argue that it wasn't a huge deal because hundreds of other children could receive the grades I did. I was greeted with disinterest and a continual reminder that I wasn't living up to his standards rather than pride or satisfaction. For him, no matter how good I performed, it was never enough. I was affected by his disapproval in areas other than academics. Every time I wanted to engage in extracurricular activities with my friends or play sports, he would quickly put an end to it. I was informed that my studies were the only thing I needed to concentrate on in order to leave his house as quickly as possible. I was reminded by those hurtful remarks that I was not a child to be cherished and cared for, but rather a burden. I didn't have the same parental support as my peers, who would talk about how their parents pushed them to pursue their interests and cherish their youth. I was always reminded that I was only a visitor to his home and that I had to follow instructions or face expulsion. The weekends, which ought to have been spent unwinding or enjoying friends, were no exception. Even if all I wanted to do was go to the park or hang out at a friend's house, he would go on a tirade about how I was squandering his money if I ever asked to go out or spend time with my friends. He'd start a tirade about how hard he was working to pay for my education and how I had no right to squander time or money on friendships. It seemed like he instinctively judged anything that made me happy or gave me a sense of normalcy to be trivial or undesirable. His reaction to my 15th birthday stands out as one of the most agonizing memories I have. For me, it was a day of dread, yet most children anticipate their birthdays with joy, organizing parties or get-togethers with friends. He disliked me celebrating my birthdays every year, but I believed that year would be different. I wanted to get some pizza and watch a movie with my pals. He had a fuss when I eventually plucked up the nerve to approach him for money. He yelled at me, saying that since it was also the day my mother died, I had no right to enjoy the occasion. He made it plain to me that I should never even consider having a good time on my birthday since it would always be the worst day of the year for him. I never celebrated with my pals because of this. As you might guess, I eventually learned from all of these recurring situations that my dad obviously detested me and didn't want me around. I felt like I was always walking on thin ice, trying to avoid doing anything that would make him angry or disapprove, as a result of the incessant rejection and criticism. I gradually discovered how to keep my aspirations to myself. I knew it would only result in disappointment and hurt, so I stopped looking to him for encouragement or acceptance. In order to get out of my dad's house, I put all of my effort into achieving good marks and did my best to be strong for myself. I eventually saw the results of all the effort, tenacity, and resolve I put into my studies. I still recall the day I was accepted to a prestigious institution with a full scholarship. It was a mixture of pride and relief. At last, I was leaving the house, escaping my father's controlling influence and beginning a new phase of my life where I could live as I pleased. I felt as though a tremendous burden had been removed when I left home. I was genuinely free for the first time in my life. I had some of the best times of my life throughout those 4 years of college. It was a time of joy, progress, and self-discovery. I was able to experience all that had been out of my reach for so long and live like a typical young adult at last. Even though he made an effort to exert greater control over me from a distance, I stopped listening to my dad. I'd had enough of living under his rule. It was time for me to take charge of my life and create the life I want. Even with my newfound independence and the excitement of college life, I never lost sight of my objectives. I maintained my good marks because I was eager to take advantage of the chance I had worked so hard to obtain. However, I also made sure to have fun and take advantage of everything that college had to offer. I joined clubs, attended parties, made new friends, followed my interests, and at last began to live my life as I had always dreamed. I met Sheila, my girlfriend, about this time. One of the most amazing and surprising things that happened to me in college was meeting her. There was something about Sheila that captured my attention right away. We are both very similar in that we are driven, ambitious, and career-focused. Beyond that though, our deeper connection was what truly set our relationship apart. No one else ever understood me the way Sheila did. The fact that we can sit together for hours on end without having to talk to each other is one of my favorite things about her. She lets me lose myself in my thoughts, which is really uncommon in relationships. I never feel under pressure to be someone else when I'm with Sheila. Whether we are sitting side by side, content in our solitude, or discussing our aspirations and ambitions, we appreciate each other's presence. For the first time in my life, Sheila gave me the genuine sense that I didn't need to bear the shame I had been carrying around for so long. She was able to see straight through the misery I had been experiencing. Pain that had grown so pervasive in my life that I was virtually blind to its abnormality. Sheila emphasized how terribly incorrect it was for my father to hold me responsible for my mother's passing and how no child should have to deal with that. She urged me to go to therapy, which I had never given much thought to before. I didn't even know there was a method to break free from my dad's influence because his words were so embedded in my brain. One of the things that changed my life the most was going to therapy. At first, it was difficult since it required a lot of bravery and work to face the truth about my childhood, admit the trauma I had experienced, and learn how to destroy the harmful ideas I had internalized. However, therapy let me see things that nothing else had. It made it clear to me how faulty my dad's reasoning was and how much I was worthy of better. I gradually came to understand that my dad's resentment and rage were his problems, not mine, and that I wasn't responsible for my mother's passing. I saw that my anger toward my dad increased as I began to recover. It seemed as though all of the bitterness I had been harboring was at last emerging. For years, I had been carrying the guilt he had placed on me while attempting to gain his favor and be the child he desired me to be. However, I was now coming to the realization that I had nothing to do with that and that he had unfairly and cruelly burdened me with his rage and anguish. I found it challenging to keep up any sort of contact with him during my time in college because of this rage. I rarely spoke with him, and when I did, it was tense and brief. I couldn't help but be resentful when I yelled at him, and I wasn't very patient when he tried to manipulate or be critical of me. I finally confronted him about everything at one point. It was a spontaneous outburst of repressed emotion and frustration rather than anything I had planned. I explained to him how his words and deeds had severely damaged my mental health throughout the years he had held me responsible for my mother's passing, and how I was determined to stop him from doing that to me. I made it plain that I was tired of being used as a scapegoat and that I was entitled to dignity and respect. If not, I would sever my relationship with him forever. This time he had nothing to say. I had thought that he would apologize, but he didn't refute what I had said either. I observed a shift in my dad's interactions with me following that talk. Every time he spoke to me, he seemed to attempt to be kinder and less severe. He seemed to be trying to change, to be more sensitive to my emotions. However, our relationship remained tense in spite of this. A minor change in behavior was not enough to undo years of suffering and animosity. Although I was grateful for his attempt, it would take more than that to mend the relationship, if it could be restored at all, given the harm he had caused. Even while my connection with my dad remained strained over the years, I no longer felt the same kind of shame or rage. I've gradually realized that although I can't alter the past, I can manage how I allow it to impact the future. Sheila's encouragement and support have undoubtedly been crucial to this journey, and I am immensely appreciative of her for assisting me in realizing my worth as a person deserving of respect, love, and happiness. My dad recently married DEI, his lover. I chose to go to the modest private wedding with my girlfriend Sheila, in spite of everything that had transpired between us over the years. As they embarked on this new phase of their lives together, we wanted to offer our support and best wishes. I was pleased for my father and believed that he may improve as a result of getting married. But my dad called me a month after they were married, seeming desperate. He was having financial difficulties as a result of some bad financial decisions. He informed me that he was facing eviction after failing to pay his rent for the previous 6 months. He claimed that he couldn't discuss this with his wife since it would cause them to argue. He asked me if I could pay his rent right now. As soon as I heard this, I declined. Given our complex past, I didn't want to be used as a financial safety net, even if I had the resources to do so. I didn't want to create a situation where he could come to me for financial support if things went wrong because I've worked hard to create the life I have. However, I began to feel bad after discussing it with Sheila. I couldn't get rid of the thought that perhaps I was being too severe, that perhaps he really needed assistance, and that he was still my father in spite of everything. I then gave my dad a call back and suggested a middle ground. I informed him that since I lived alone in my house and had enough room for him and DEI, I would let them to remain with me temporarily even if I wasn't willing to pay his rent. Until they saved enough money to get back on their feet and locate a new place, I offered them they could stay at my house. Considering everything that had transpired between us in the past, it wasn't an easy decision, but I believed it was the right one. I made it apparent that this was only a short-term solution and that I wanted him to put in the effort to get back on his feet. After considering my offer for a while, my dad finally gave me a call and accepted the deal. He and DEI moved in with me in 2 weeks, and I prepared a guest room for them. For us all, the first month or two was a time of transition. I hadn't lived with my dad for years, and we had changed significantly since then. I was no longer the adolescent who had to put up with his remarks in silence. I had my own life, rituals, and habits as an adult. Unfortunately, his previous patterns quickly reappeared. As though nothing had changed, my dad began making remarks about my habits and manner of life, including how I spent my time, maintained the house, and even handled my daily tasks. He seemed to have something to say all the time. However, I had changed from who I was before. I wasn't going to give him that much control over me this time. Every time he began to criticize me or try to dictate how I lived my life, I would tell him to stop. I would make it plain that, particularly while residing under my roof, he had no right to criticize my decisions. I was forceful, but I wasn't impolite. I refused to let him tell me how I should live any longer. Naturally, his wife, Dee, was not pleased with this. She said a few of times that I should respect my father. She would explain to me how much he had given up. Since I knew the truth about him and she obviously didn't know about half of the things he had done to me as a youngster, I would just shake my head. Although I respected my father, I wasn't going to let him control me or override my decisions. I wasn't going to repeat the cycle of sacrificing my happiness to satisfy my father, something I had done for far too long. Nevertheless, I would simply remain silent any time Dei made those comments because it wasn't my place to tell her the truth about my dad. There was no point in arguing about it. Although I was aware that cohabitation would be difficult, I thought that eventually we could all figure out how to get along without too much conflict. However, one evening after a particularly demanding workday, I returned home to discover my dad and his wife watching TV in the living room. The kitchen was overflowing with dishes, and the house was a complete disaster. Since I had frequently reminded my dad and his wife that they needed to do their fair share of the housework and that it was his day to clean, I questioned him about why he hadn't done it. "You know," Dad began in that tone that always made me tense, "you're a grown-up who I raised all by myself after your mother died. Asking me to perform additional work for you at this age should make you feel embarrassed. You're capable of doing the dishwashing yourself." Hearing such statements infuriated me so much that I retorted, "You know what's truly embarrassing? The fact that you were the one who pleaded with me to move in for free. And now you're sitting here on my couch, in my home, eating my food, watching my TV and giving me directions. This entire time, neither you nor your wife have offered me any assistance. You know what? You can just pack your bags and depart at any time if you don't feel like doing the dishes." My father simply looked at me, surprised by how strongly I had responded. For an instant I feared he may actually stand up and storm out of the tense quiet. But knowing that he had nowhere to go, I turned and left the room, slamming the kitchen door behind me as my heart raced with impatience and rage. When I came downstairs the following morning, Dei and I were by ourselves in the kitchen. It's likely that my dad left early for work. Dei asked if she could speak with me as I was ready to leave the kitchen. I decided to sit down and listen even though I wasn't totally sure what to anticipate. Dei looked serious as she started to explain to me how upset my dad was following our talk the night before. She claimed that given the amount of money he had allegedly spent to assist me in purchasing my home, I had no right to treat him in that manner. My dad hadn't provided me with any financial support since I left for college, so I was understandably shocked. I had saved hard for years to purchase this house with my own funds. The assertion that he had made a substantial contribution to my acquisition was wholly untrue. When I asked Dei what she meant, she clarified that my dad had told her that he had contributed to my property purchase by using some of his savings. It seemed almost funny to me that this was the story my dad had given her, and it was like a light bulb going out. Dei persisted in saying that I should be thankful for the assistance my dad had allegedly provided me before I could reply. She believed that since he was having financial difficulties, it was only right that I begin paying him back some of that money by housing them while they were living with me. She argued that since this was essentially my dad's house as well, it was the least I could do in light of the alleged financial sacrifices my dad had made for me. I couldn't help but giggle at Dei as I continued to stare at her face. I mean, I couldn't take it seriously because it was all so ridiculous. When I eventually stopped laughing, I told her the truth. My dad hadn't paid $1 and I was the real owner of the house. Her expression was priceless. She was obviously unaware that I was the owner of the house, and she must have been overcome with shame and rage. In response to her question about whether or not my dad had ever assisted me, I explained that he didn't even have enough money to cover his own rent, so how could he ever afford to buy my house? She didn't protest much after our conversation, so I assume she saw the truth too. Shortly thereafter though, she gathered her belongings and departed from my home that same day. Since it was none of my business, I didn't stop her. When my dad returned home later that night, he contacted Dei and asked her why her belongings were gone. He began blaming me for speaking out after he learned that I had told her the truth about who owned the house. He claimed that by disclosing the truth, I purposefully ruined his marriage and caused his wife discomfort. He claims that since he now felt inferior to me and that it was somehow my responsibility that he couldn't afford a house of his own, I ought to have been more understanding and allowed her to believe his lie. It was unbelievably frustrating. I made it clear to him that I was offering them my house in order to help them, and instead of receiving appreciation, I was being held responsible for their issues. My dad seemed to have forgotten that I owed him nothing and that he was the only one at fault in this situation. Even as an adult, he was attempting to use me as a scapegoat for something that wasn't my fault, as if all the years of him treating me like I was the issue had suddenly returned. He refused to listen though. He didn't see my point of view and demanded that I call DEI to apologize and make things right by lying, giving her the impression that he had assisted me in some way when I bought this place. I said that I would not tell his wife a falsehood on his behalf. The continual manipulation and finger-pointing had worn me out, and I had had enough. My mental health was beginning to suffer as a result of my dad's continual arguments with me, so I finally told him that I could no longer bear his presence. I requested that he get his belongings and vacate by the next day. I took the painful decision, but in order to preserve my own tranquility and sanity, I had to set and uphold boundaries. My dad argued that he had nowhere to go and begged for more time, but I was too upset at the time to give a damn about his predicament or his justifications. The following morning, I enforced my choice and forced my dad to vacate. Since DEI won't talk to him, my dad has been contacting me to whine about how I have destroyed his marriage and his life. He claims that a good son would never have ejected their parents and continuously blaming me for DEI's current situation. Update 1. I'm relieved that everyone is aware of the immense trauma my dad has caused me over the years. Many people have suggested that I get in touch with DEI and tell her the truth about my early years because she could not be completely aware of my dad's true identity. I've stayed out in his affairs up until now, but I think it's crucial that she understands the truth because he may have misled her about other matters. I'm going to get in touch with her and speak with her directly. Update 2. A week has passed since my last update. DEI and I finally got a chance to sit down and talk about everything. As it happens, she was unaware of the type of upbringing I experienced. I told her about my emotional trauma, blame, and the effects it had on me. She appeared astonished and acknowledged that Dad had presented a very different image of himself, suggesting that he was a struggling single parent who had given up everything for his child. I was so shocked that I had to shake my head. I told tales of my early years and how I was always held responsible for my mother's death. She conveyed her understanding and concern. I then told her how fortunate I was to get a well-paying career and how hard I had fought to establish myself during college. I was able to move into my own place and save money as a result. I explained to her that I didn't enjoy my father controlling everything around my house because, as a child, he never let me be who I was. DEI recognized my suffering. She then disclosed that Dad had lost all of his money as a result of gambling, and she hadn't told me about it before as he wanted to hide it and was too embarrassed about it. She clarified that she had flatly rejected my dad's initial offer to move in with me. She didn't feel comfortable living with me, so I suppose that's why my dad lied to her and said that he had helped pay for my house, which made her feel less bad about accepting the offer to remain with us. She was upset though, when she subsequently learned from me that his claims of helping with my house were completely false and really another ploy to achieve what he wanted. She went on to express her embarrassment at having to ask me for rent that day. I informed her that Dad was solely responsible for his falsehoods and that it wasn't her fault. DEI told me as we were leaving that she intended to take some time away from Dad to think about their relationship after our talk. Update 3. Hello everyone. I am aware that it has been 3 months since I last made any updates to this page. Since I requested my dad to move out, I have severed all ties with him. Although it hasn't been a simple decision, it is essential for my emotional and mental well-being. He tried to point the finger at me for everything the last time we spoke, but I stopped talking to him. I simply blocked him right away. I must say that I've been feeling a lot better ever since. I feel relieved and more clear-headed now that the pressure and manipulation have subsided. I feel as though my privacy and tranquility have finally returned. Sheila, my girlfriend, has been really helpful during this process. She has supported me, helped me process my feelings, and offered consolation and encouragement. Her assistance has had a significant impact, and I am truly appreciative of her. I'm gradually discovering a new sense of security and contentment now that my dad is no longer involved and Sheila is by my side. I'm concentrating on creating the life I desire, working for my objectives, and appreciating the good things in my relationship. I refuse to force my son to forgive my brother after he excluded him from his wedding. Now my family's divided over it. Allow her to organize everything, including the location, cuisine, music, etc. In July of last year, Karen made the decision to organize a destination wedding at a posh resort. The invitation arrived, and it was sent to my son and myself. I tried to book our hotel room as soon as the page launched, and I even had a +1 if I wanted to. To be clear, I couldn't risk not getting a room, therefore I had to call the hotel to make my reservation because the link wasn't working. The email confirmation stated room for 2 adults, but I didn't give it much thought because I thought the hotel representative's language barrier might have caused the error. At about the same time, I also purchased our airline tickets. Less than a month before the wedding, in January, my sister-in-law contacted me in tears and told me that Karen had messed up. My kid was 13 at the time, and it seems that the resort was adults only, meaning that no one under the age of 16 was permitted. When I requested whether Leo and I might stay at another hotel, they informed me that my son would not even be permitted to attend the ceremony or the reception because the entire resort was child-free. Disappointed, I promised my sister-in-law that I would discuss it with my son. She insisted that she and Jack wanted to inform him in person, even though I knew how thrilled he was about his uncle's wedding. To be honest, when my son was informed that he couldn't go, he broke down in tears. He begged them to reschedule the wedding, even providing his savings as collateral. After 30 minutes of this, my sister-in-law became irate and informed him that the day wasn't about him and that he was being self-centered. After a while, Leo apologized and retired to his room. My son ceased communicating with my brother after the wedding. Unless it was specifically concerning me, such as when Jack had to relay a message because he couldn't get through to me, Leo would ignore any messages that Jack sent him. Leo would only answer simple queries like, "Can you pass the salt?" or "Help grandma with the plates at family get-togethers," but he would turn his back on my brother if Jack or Mary attempted to strike up a discussion or inquire about his schooling. To make up for the wedding, Jack and Mary offered to take my son on a special spring break vacation a month after the wedding, but he turned them down and subsequently informed me he didn't want to go. He adhered to his decision, which was terrible because I knew he truly wanted to go there and I wasn't yet able to finance it. The same thing occurred on Leo's birthday. As I do every year, he inquired whether I was going to throw him a party. When I replied that I was, he asked me not to bring his aunt and uncle. He only stated that if they didn't want him on their special day, he didn't want them on his. I attempted to persuade him to invite them because they are family and were truly sorry. When I told my brother he wasn't invited, he started crying. This past weekend, when we were at my mom's house and the topic of Leo's plans for college came up, things became heated. My mother urged Leo to begin making plans after asking him if he still intended to attend the same institution as Jack. Leo responded that he had changed his mind and was no longer interested. In response, my son said he had decided to study something else because he was no longer interested. "I thought you wanted to be like your uncle," my mother then asked. "Why would I want to be like him?" was my son's recent response. I stepped in at this moment and reminded Leo that his rudeness was unnecessary, but the harm had already been done. After hearing what he had to say, my brother and sister-in-law quickly departed. My brother texted me last night, accusing me of being bad for letting my kid harbor this resentment. He even said that I wasn't attempting to mend their relationship because I was jealous of it. I retorted that he was solely responsible for allowing his mother-in-law to arrange a wedding where my child was not welcome and that these were the results of his own behavior. He ended the call. My mother and a few other family members believe that in order for us to move on, I should make my kid forgive my brother, claiming that it was only a little error and that there was no malice. But I don't concur. My kid was obviously harmed, and he should only be given the opportunity to move past his hurt and forgive them when he is ready. Edit. I apologize for not getting back to you yesterday. After viewing the Civ 7 revelation, I became preoccupied with a Civ 6 game. Now that I've read through every remark, I wanted to respond to a topic that keeps coming up. I wasn't at the wedding. It didn't feel right to leave after what had happened, and I didn't want to leave my son alone while the majority of the family was away. Leo's tone, more than the words he used, was impolite in his response to Grandma's query. He provoked his uncle with a tone that I've seen him employ previously and am familiar with. He was attempting to start a quarrel, not only answering an improper query. I have respected his boundaries and understand his pain and anger, but that doesn't mean I have to put up with his acting aggressively whenever he feels like it. As for the actual conversation, let me summarize what Mary, my son and I said. Mary, we made a mistake and you won't be able to go to the wedding. Leo, but why? I want to go and you invited me. Mary said, the venue only accepts adults, you can't enter. Leo said, can't you make an exception? Me. Leo, they can't. Do you recall being informed that they couldn't have kids in the bar when you applied for a part-time job there? That's how it is. Leo says, can't you get married somewhere else? Mary. We are unable to. We have already spent a lot of money on that location. Leo replied, I can give you my savings. Mary. It's insufficient. Additionally, none of the guests want to forfeit the money they have already spent. Leo. My father is wealthy. I can leave if he gives you money. It's unfair. I want to attend the wedding. Jack. Leo, I apologize, but we can make it right. After the wedding, how about we take you to Greece? Leo. I don't want to go to Greece, he said, growing increasingly agitated. I'd like to attend the wedding. Why do you not want me to be there? Me. It was an error, Leo. We were unaware that there was a minimum age limit, but they wanted you there. Leo, that's unfair, then why did you invite me? On my uncle's special day I would like to be with him. This is not our fault, Mary exclaimed, raising her voice. You have to let it go, it simply occurred. I'm sorry you can't make it, but you must quit being so self-centered. It's not your special day, it's mine. It was then that Leo lost it. I tried to comfort him and gave Mary a shut-up look without saying anything, as I indicated in a previous comment. Jack did say something to her, but I was unable to understand what he was saying. Leo apologized and begged to retire to his room after he had cooled down. Jack and Mary made an effort to apologize, but Leo ignored them. My kid requested me to go, but I followed him to his room to check on him. I returned to the living area. What the devil is wrong with you? I asked. It is not your place to shout at my son. Mary, I apologize, I simply have too much stress. For the past 2 months, my mom and I have been at odds over this. Me? I don't give a damn. You made it worse when I told you over the phone that he would be disappointed. Leave. Jack. Jacob, please. It wasn't her intention. I'll compensate Leo. Me? I don't care, I said. Leave. After they departed, I went to see how Leo was doing. I don't remember everything that was said because I don't have a photographic memory, but that's the main idea of what transpired that day. Update 1. In a nutshell, we will no longer be going to family gatherings. My brother promised to respect my son's boundaries after we spoke. He also described the actual events. Leo is currently doing a lot better. Longer update. I told my mother that until things settled down and, more crucially, until Leo felt at ease again, we would both no longer attend family events. She was obviously unhappy, but it appeared that she had now realized how much Leo had been harmed by her persistence. Surprisingly, she explained that she was so adamant that Leo forgive Jack because he had fallen into depression. Leo might become estranged from the family if I made him forgive his uncle, I informed her. When I informed my sister that we would no longer be going to events, she was equally upset, but she understood. In order for the children to continue spending time together, she recommended that we establish our own weekly ritual. Over the last few weeks, Leo has spent time at my sister's house 1 week and her kids have visited me the following. Leo appears okay with this arrangement, and it's beneficial that grown-ups aren't pressuring him to talk to his uncle. I texted my brother the weekend after my post to arrange a private meeting so we could chat. Mary wasn't present. Jack quickly expressed his regret for his actions and the things he had said to me. He verified my suspicions. He had been under stress due to frequent arguments with Mary and had even contemplated divorce due to the severity of the situation. I assured him I wasn't worried about it, even though it might sound harsh. I hoped he would be honest with me about what had transpired. Jack insists that it wasn't until late November that he learned the venue was child-free. But Mary had known for a long time, perhaps since the beginning, as many of you suspected. It seems that this all began when Jack and Mary took Leo to the beach a few years back. My son unintentionally called Jack Dad when they were playing, but he swiftly corrected himself. Jack said it was simply a minor lapse, similar to when a toddler calls a teacher mom. Jack dismissed Leo's embarrassment with a laugh. The catch? During that vacation, Jack's father-in-law, Phil, and mother-in-law Karen, were present and heard Leo. Knowing that Mary couldn't have children, Karen lost it when they got back from the trip and said she was triggered by witnessing a random child call Jack Dad. Karen became poisonous and hostile toward Mary, making demands such as preventing Leo from being present during her visits, despite Mary's attempts to clarify that it was simply an innocent error. Karen coerced Mary into allowing her to organize the ideal wedding for her only daughter, despite Jack and Mary's initial desire to elope and forego a lavish ceremony. After years of manipulating emotions, Mary ultimately gave in an attempt to maintain harmony. Karen then took over the wedding plans and deliberately picked a location that would not accommodate children. When Mary tried to protest after learning that the venue was reserved, Karen played the victim and dismissed her worries. Even if they slept at a different hotel, Mary said she tried to work out a deal with the resort that would let kids attend just the ceremony and reception. The management, however, refused to change the policy. Mary became more and more nervous as the date drew near, and in November she told Jack the truth. My brother claims that Mary finally snapped at Leo, in part because to her own mother's persistent manipulation and bullying, and in part because she felt guilty for allowing things to get to this point. Jack informed me that instead of excluding Leo and my sister's kids from the wedding, he would have called it off if he had known sooner. However, it was impossible to cancel by November since too many attendees had already reserved hotel rooms and flights. None of this, I informed Jack, justified the way he and Mary had handled Leo, particularly Mary. Even though she was older than 40, she nonetheless picked a battle with a toddler. Because Leo intended to utilize the £2,000 he had saved to attend Jack's wedding, she had screamed at him and called him selfish. I reminded Jack that he had disappointed Leo, who admired him and considered him a hero. Leo had learned that Jack didn't value him as much as he had assumed. I informed Jack that I would go low contact myself and that I would back Leo's decision to stop communicating with him. Jack requested an opportunity to apologize to Leo, but I informed him that he had already done so and that his only option was to wait for Leo to accept it. Although Jack appeared offended, he promised to honor our requests and give us some space and time. Regarding my son, I expressed my regret to him for not advocating for him earlier and for making him go to weekly family events. I informed him that going future, he was free to choose how he wanted to manage that aspect of the family. I informed Leo that I would be there for him no matter what and that I wouldn't be disappointed if he decided to quit going entirely, even if he looked hesitant to do so. I was pleased when Leo proposed that we spend more time together, alone, doing things he used to do with my brother, rather than attending weekly family events. We attended a vintage car exhibition last week, and we're going to see Wicked the following week. It sounds like fun, but I'm not a theatrical person. Leo shouldn't hold back simply because he had a falling out with someone he cared about, I told him, adding that I was concerned he had stopped doing things he enjoyed. In essence, I informed him that he could still enjoy those activities, alone or with someone else. He acknowledged that, in spite of Jack, he had ceased doing them even though he really wanted to. I then made the decision to buy him some games that he had been looking forward to but had refunded following the altercation with my brother as an early Christmas present. He even persuaded me to join him on his PS5 for a game of Final Fantasy Online while he plays on his PC. He seems to like watching me fail, even though I'll admit that I have no idea what I'm doing because the last Final Fantasy game I played was still in 2D. We would appreciate any advice you may have. For my birthday, we ultimately agreed to travel to his ideal location. I was a little disappointed that I won't be celebrating my brother's birthday for the first time in almost 50 years, but all that matters is that I have my son. It's a relief that Leo is content and less anxious about family issues. It's also encouraging that the family appears to be finally recognizing our limits. All I can hope for is that my brother can improve his marriage. Even though I'm angry at what they did, I do want him to be content. Am I the asshole for snapping at my jealous sister during her engagement party, telling her she'll choke on her jealousy one day? Original post. Hi, I'll try to keep it as short as I can. I promise I'll clarify things if there are confusions and sorry about them in advance. I'm 21F and I have 2 siblings. My sister is 24 and engaged. My brother is 28 and married to my sister-in-law who is 25. My parents hosted a family luncheon to celebrate my sister's engagement at their house. I went early to help them set up, my brother and sister-in-law a little bit later than everyone else. My sister and her fiancé arrived last. Everything was going well and everyone was happy until my sister got a text and pulled me aside. She asked me if I could go outside and meet a friend of hers who's going to drop something off for her. I did. The something was a big ball of pure happiness, a Saint Bernard dog with a cute little formal tie around his neck. As adorable as he was, I couldn't bring him in because my sister-in-law is allergic. Her allergy is not severe but still. Everyone in the family knows of it. I told the friend to please wait while I talked to my sister, she did not. I texted my sister that I can't bring him inside. She texted that it was fine, to bring it in because it's a surprise and he's the newest addition to the family. I insisted that I couldn't, then I texted my brother about it because it had been 10 minutes. I'm standing in the driveway with a big doggy that would not stop licking my legs, not knowing what to do. From what I was told inside, my brother pulled my sister aside and asked her not to bring the dog in. That she knows his wife is allergic. She refused, saying that it's an open space, that sister-in-law will be fine. He then told her the news that sister-in-law is pregnant. I already knew and they were waiting until she passed her first trimester. My sister then went outside, dragged the dog and then me in when I resisted. My brother, seeing this, excused himself and left with sister-in-law. We tried resuming the lunch after that but it was awkward at best. When my sister and her fiancé cut the cake, she grabbed her glass of champagne to make a toast. The toast was her rambling about how selfish my brother and his wife were, that they couldn't let her have one day to herself and had to ruin and overshadow it. That they were not the first or last couple to get pregnant. Both of my parents tried to shush her but she was on a roll and went on to call sister-in-law an attention seeker that just had to give the family the first grandchild. I finally had enough and told her that green isn't a good look on her and that she was going to choke on her jealousy one day. Then I got up and left. She called me a bitch on my way out. My mom called me after and told me that it was a bit harsh even if she was harsher. She also suggested that the 3 of us, Siblings, talk it out after things settle a bit. My dad is staying neutral. I haven't heard from relatives that were at the luncheon. AITA. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. Question. Did your sister also know about the pregnancy, like you did, and pulled the dog stunt to make sure they left instead of making a public announcement, like she would have had the roles been reversed? OOP. My sister had no idea about the pregnancy. None of my family did. The only reason I know is because she got sick from the smell of chili cheese fries when we were having a girls' night in. We kind of just looked at each other, and a light bulb went off in our heads. It wasn't like my sister was purposely excluded or anything. And I can confidently say that my brother and sister-in-law would have never hijacked her day to announce their pregnancy. They were planning their own dinner next month to announce it. I assume that's done with, but maybe we can salvage it with a gender reveal if they're up for it. IDK OOP's mom. OOP's sister dragging her out of the house. My mom has always wanted us to talk our issues out because, at the end of the day, you're siblings. But yeah, that being said, I just want to clarify that even though she dragged me, it didn't take much since I have the smallest stature of my siblings, so she didn't use a lot of force. I did call my brother and sister-in-law right after I got home, and they were good for the most part. They're obviously pissed, but since the news is already out, there's not much that can be done about it. Commenter. She didn't even treat the poor puppy well. The last thing a new puppy needs to deal with is the chaos and overstimulation of a family party. And what did they do with the poor wee bugger while they were cutting the cake and making their pissy speeches? Just leave it outside? Inside to piddle in a corner, 'cause the first few weeks with my pups they piddled with gay abandon every few minutes. OP, I ended up keeping him company before the cake cutting thing went down, but yeah, he's not a puppy. If I were to guess, I would say he's maybe 2 years old? I volunteer at a shelter, but I'm definitely not a pro. Commenter, NTA, but I'm confused about who the dog was actually for. If the sister is engaged, that means she's gonna be leaving home, so is it her dog? If she got a dog for her parents, that's fucking weird to get a big dog for somebody as a surprise gift. Or did she just do it to divert the attention onto herself because she already knew the sister-in-law was pregnant? I'm so confused. OOP, the dog is hers and her fiancé. They both have their own place where the dog will be living, but she brought him to our parents' house to apparently introduce him to the family. Mom's words when I asked her about it. Commenter, introduce a full-grown Saint Bernard to the family with an allergic member. You can't get much more flying dog fur than that. Surely the introductions could have been made at a better time. Did your mother know she was going to do this? If so, not cool, Mom. OP, I don't think she knew since she and my dad seemed pretty surprised, and then she spent the end of the party looking inside and outside the house for droppings. So IDK commenter. What worries me is this person will see her plan pissed everyone off and she will blame the dog and take it to the pound. Or worse, set it free in a remote area. People like this woman are so wrapped up in their own world, they have zero self-awareness. OP, I didn't think of that TBH. Even though I don't think my sister would ever harm a defenseless animal, I'll keep tabs and make sure he's treated well. Commenter, info, when you say she is allergic, what do you mean? You say not severely so, not a life-threatening condition. But would she be miserable within seconds, or is it a little bit uncomfortable? Allergies have very wide ranges. Also, they don't affect a pregnancy at all. Unless it's life-threatening, of course. The baby won't notice a thing. OOP, I don't think it's within seconds, but she does start sneezing, gets a shortness of breath, and this is an example, I pet a dog and touch her face for whatever reason, her eyes get a bit swollen and puffy. Commenter, I have not read all the comments yet, but what was the fiancé's reaction? Surely he is having second thoughts about marrying your mess of a sister. OOP, he was just kind of standing there, looking awkward as hell, but he didn't seem shocked by her behavior and was standing by her. He even raised his glass. One more clarification. I just want to clarify that they didn't announce their pregnancy at my sister's engagement party. My brother told her and only her privately since she was saying no to him asking her not to bring the dog in. As far as I know, they have a cordial relationship, sister and sister-in-law, not overly friendly but also not standoffish. It could be that my sister-in-law's whims dictate every event. I'm at almost every family event, some I couldn't attend due to personal reasons, but the ones I have been to, nothing of the sort happened. I do get why it's seen as my brother and I against her, but I just feel like in this situation, he's justified. I will also be mentioning the deep clean to my parents. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. OOP is voted NTA Relationship Advice Post. Title, My 21F Sister, 24F, keeps jokingly asking me who I'm sleeping with and if I've taken my BC. Birth control. This is getting so weird, guys. I made a post on another sub about something that happened with my family at my sister's engagement party. Gist of it is my sister found out my SIL is pregnant and flipped about them, and me, ruining her day. Since then, has she and I sort of made up? I sent her a text apologizing for what I said and she accepted it, but we didn't have a proper conversation about any of it. Anyway, since my apology, she asked who I'm seeing at the moment, more importantly if it's a man or a woman, if it's men then how many. And if I'm being careful with my BC, I was confused and mildly offended at her acting like I'm the whore of Babylon when she knows the only guy I've had sex with is my long-term ex-boyfriend, but whatever. I told her that I just started seeing a woman and that she's not getting a niece or nephew from me anytime soon, obviously, but it's a joke about my dad who used to warn both us and our older brother when we were younger after every family meeting that he won't have teen mothers or fathers under his roof. I thought it was her own weird way of checking up on my life even if she had never done it before, but she literally sends me a message about my BC every couple of days even though I told her I'm seeing a woman, not that the woman and I are having sex, but you get biology. I don't know how to approach this, like I have zero clue. Advice please? Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. I read the other post. I think she's worried that you'll end up pregnant before her wedding too. I mean, it came out at her engagement luncheon that your SIL is pregnant. So she already thinks your brother Sil is one-upping her. I think she's focused on who else is going to show her up at her wedding. I'm not saying she's right or even sane, but that's the feeling I get. OP, but the thing is that I'm nowhere near a place in my life where I'm even thinking of having a baby. No offense to people who have babies at 21, 22, but I'm not trying to do that. Yeah, accidents can happen, but I'm not sleeping around with men, and even if I was, I would be taking double precautions. Condoms BC. I think she's miffed that my brother is having the first grandbaby and wants to have the second. IDK, but I'm worried about her behavior. TBH, this isn't healthy or normal. Commenter. Hey sis, you keep asking me about this, like it's really important to you. What's going on? OOP. I mean, I will definitely ask her, but I don't want her to get defensive because she perceives me on my brother's side in all of this, which yes, I'm a little bit guilty of that. Update post, October 24th, 2024, 8 days later, 5 weeks from OG post. Hi guys. It's been around a month or so and TBH, I don't have that much of an update, but a lot of people have been asking me about the doggy and it's easier than telling people individually, so here it is. First things first, the update on my sibling situation. My brother and SIL have gone LC with my sister until they get a proper apology, which hasn't happened yet, but I think it will happen soon. My sister has been talking to my mom about wanting to be in our future nephew-niece's life, so there's that at least. Also, my SIL is officially out of her first trimester and she and the baby are healthy and thriving thankfully. She has been having a bit of a hard time when it comes to smells and pregnancy stuff, but I think that's to be expected. Don't come at me, just from what I've read. We've also been planning a gender reveal party for next month, so we're just focusing on the positive stuff for now. As for my sister and I did send her an apology for how harsh I was with her at the party and she accepted it and apologized for calling me a bitch, but it's been so damn weird when it comes to our dynamic, especially since she's suddenly all up in my business about who I'm sleeping with. But that's another issue. Now for the awaited update, Barkley. Turns out the big fluff ball has an adorable bark, one you wouldn't expect when seeing him, hence his name. As some of you predicted, my sister was not up for the massive job that is taking care of a Saint Bernard, and a week and a half after the party, she called and asked me to find him another home. I volunteer at a shelter and know a lot of people who would love to adopt. I honestly wanted to keep him myself because I've grown attached, but I live in an apartment and not only would it be impossible, it would also be cruel to keep him cooped up like that. Luckily, a friend of a friend has the space for him to be happy and safe and took him in with the promise of letting me see him whenever we're both free, and now I get random pics and videos of Barkley in his element, all happy and bark fighting with the guy's next door neighbor's Yorkie. Don't worry, there's fences between them. So yeah, just wanted to say thank you guys for all the advice and opinions. I appreciate all of you. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter. I mean, I'm more worried about the other neighbors who have to listen to that, but it seems like things at least worked out for Barkley. OOP. I get your concern, but from what I've seen of the guy's neighborhood, went to check it out and meet him first, it's a lot of families and most of the kids have pets, cats, dogs and a parrot, guy's intel, so it seems like they're used to pet noises. After years of bullying, my sister invited me to dinner. When I arrived, she made me clean up, calling me a pathetic waitress. My parents have never concealed the fact that my sister, Helen, has always been the best child in the family. The youngest of my parents' children, she was considered their miracle child. Despite having serious health issues, my parents had been trying for years to have another child after me. My parents were effectively told to give up on growing their family after my mother experienced problems following my delivery, which prompted physicians to advise against getting pregnant again. But my mother defied all expectations and got pregnant again 5 years later. For my father, who was thrilled about the possibility of having another child, this news was nothing short of a miracle. This position as a miracle baby had a significant impact on my sister's upbringing and the way my parents regarded her. They have always treated her like a queen, going above and beyond to make sure she has the finest of everything. Her unique position within the family was further cemented by the lavish celebration of each of her accomplishments and milestones. It was obvious to everyone, including me, that my sister had a special and elevated place in our parents' affections, since this partiality was never covert. Rather, it was publicly expressed and accepted. Not to be misunderstood, my parents also made sure I had all I needed. However, their treatment of me frequently seemed like an afterthought. For example, school functions. My parents would always choose to go to my sister's function if we had activities on the same day. As if my wants and occurrences were somehow less significant, they would explain that she was the youngest and so required them more. My parents still treasure the innumerable childhood photos of my sister that are painstakingly arranged in albums. They haven't even saved one of my albums, on the other hand, saying that my photos were lost in a storm. I would have liked to see how I grew up, therefore I wish they could have at least saved a couple photos. When my early life wasn't kept the same way as my sister's, it's difficult to avoid feeling like an afterthought. When I was growing up, my sister Helen's problems, no matter how minor, were promptly addressed and fixed. However, my father would brush me off and label me spoiled if I ever complained or wanted something. My mother would reprimand me for being more confident like my sister and accuse me of being overly theatrical if I ever felt nervous about trying new things or approaching strangers. I always felt that my sister's worries and emotions were more important than mine because of the way my parents treated me. Then came the game of blame. I was also held accountable for my sister's activities if she ever committed a transgression. My parents say that since I was the eldest, I ought to have taught her to be better. Because of my birth order, I was always held accountable, even if I had nothing to do with her behavior. This unwarranted ongoing blaming made me even more of the underdog and made me live in perpetual shadow of my sister. Helen didn't help either. She was well aware of how to take advantage of her status as the favorite child, and frequently used it to outdo me or get away with things. She would often coerce me into letting her use my possessions or put on my clothes without my consent during even the most minor arguments. She would go to our parents and complain if I ever ventured to object, accusing me of being conceited and self-centered. I would unavoidably receive criticism for not sharing and be made to feel guilty in every circumstance. But Helen's actions were distinctly biased. She was always very protective of her belongings and never let me touch them. We shared a room for a long time, and she aggressively protected her side and possessions. The dynamic remained the same even after we went into different rooms. She was quite particular about her belongings, but she always wanted me to be understanding and giving with mine. It was discouraging and frustrating to experience this double standard. I always felt alone and underappreciated because of Helen's ability to control circumstances to her advantage and my parents' steadfast support of her. They believed Helen could do no wrong, while I was always in the wrong, regardless of what I did. I had severe depression as a result of my parents' and sister's behavior. As a teenager, I experienced severe problems with my self-image and my confidence began to decline. Particularly when Helen would argue with me or make fun of me, the tension was unbearable. I was constantly on edge due to my fear of confrontation, and I frequently felt like I was about to have a panic attack because of my parents' combative yelling. I would feel as though I was choking beneath the weight of their disappointment and rage when they approached too close during their outbursts. My family didn't seem to be aware of or concerned about my difficulties. With no one to turn to for help, I felt like an animal in a cage, caught in a vicious cycle of mental and emotional suffering. Writing down my thoughts in a journal was therefore the only thing that gave me comfort. I would write my heart out on those pages every night, sharing my sorrows, disappointments, and anxieties. It was the only setting where I felt free to be totally open about my situation. It gave me some serenity and allowed me to process the pandemonium around me. Because I was worried that Helen may discover the journal and make fun of my weaknesses, I always kept it hidden beneath my bed. My worst nightmare came true one day. While I was out, Helen, who had a tendency of prying into my room even though I had repeatedly asked her to leave, discovered my journal. My one haven must have been violated when she read through its contents. My parents and Helen were seated in the living room with particularly serious expressions when I got home that evening. Given their solemn looks, I assumed there might have been a death in the family and inquired about their well-being. In order to speak with me, my dad asked me to sit down. As I obeyed, my heart began to race, and I had a bad sensation in my stomach. Then, from behind her, my mother took my journal. When I demanded to know what she was doing with my journal, my eyes dilated in amazement and disbelief. While my mother gave me an unusually serious look and inquired as to whether what I had written actually expressed my innermost sentiments, Helen simply grinned, taking pleasure in my pain. I felt completely exposed and deceived at that very moment. My notebook had been my lone haven, where I could vent my suffering and annoyance without worrying about criticism or mockery. My deepest innermost thoughts were now exposed to the very people who inspired me to compose them. I was overcome by the seriousness of the situation, and while I fought to react, I could feel a panic attack coming. Yes, it did reflect my thoughts, I said gently, adding that they had no right to read it. My father shook his head and informed me that they were really worried about me if what I had written was accurate. He went on to add that after reading my journal, they felt that I was a psychopath, who needed assistance because of the hatred they thought I had for them, and I gazed at them in confusion. I was shocked beyond belief. I had never said anything harsh about my sister or my parents in my whole journal. All I had done was write down the feelings and experiences their acts had given me over the years. But here they were, turning my sincere thoughts into something evil. For keeping a notebook, my parents began accusing me of writing such dark things, and even calling me a psychopath. My mother continued by accusing me of making things up to fill the book and saying that neither she nor my father had ever treated me in this manner. I needed serious help, she insisted, before I harmed someone. Helen went so far as to comment that she was ashamed to call me her sister after reading my notebook since my actions were clearly not normal. Retorting that I had done nothing wrong and that I had not written anything negative about them, I attempted to defend myself. I clarified that they had no authority to condemn me based on my personal reflections because the notebook was only about my life. My family, however, was obsessed with their story that something was wrong with me and didn't care about my explanations. In front of them, I felt so vulnerable and exposed. They seemed to have taken away the last remnant of my privacy and turned it against me. The very following day, my parents informed me that I needed serious help before things turned south, and that they would be taking me to see a psychiatrist. It was obvious that they perceived me as the issue because of the disdain and misdirected worry in their statements. I experienced a crippling sense of powerlessness and betrayal. Instead of admitting the pain and harm they had caused, it seemed as though they were intent on making me the issue and changing the course of events. I was deeply hurt by the betrayal, and their reaction made me feel even more alone and powerless than I had already felt. I felt quite uneasy and guilty at first when I started seeing a psychiatrist, as though I had actually done something wrong. I was ashamed to express my thoughts as I had accepted the notion that I was the problem in my family. My psychiatrist recognized my hesitancy and attempted to close the distance by using my notebook. I felt more at ease and was able to open up when she read entries from it and asked me questions based on what I had written. Since it had always been easier for me to express myself on paper than in person, the journal was a useful tool throughout our meetings. But as I was getting married to the love of my life, everything changed. My parents contacted me after learning about my impending nuptials via cousins and other family members. They were obviously shocked to be left out of such a significant event in my life. They made an unexpected call. They reluctantly expressed sorry for their previous actions and acknowledged their wrongdoings. Since I was going to have a family of my own, they acknowledged that even though they couldn't alter the past, they still wanted to make new memories with me. They pleaded with me to pardon them and let them share in this new phase of my life. Their apologies was a surprising turn of events that had me face a variety of feelings. I chose to forgive them and invite my parents to my wedding since I was starting a new chapter in my life. In addition, they asked my sister to come, but I flatly refused, and they didn't pursue the matter. In retrospect, I'm glad I invited my parents, who had a great time at the wedding. The decision seemed natural since they were truly thrilled for my husband and myself. Since then I've tried to occasionally go over to my parents' house for supper in order to catch up. I occasionally have to talk to my sister on these visits. She still attempts to enrage me by making insensitive remarks about my marriage or my family, but I always make sure to confront her conduct head-on and correct her. Helen has only grown more resentful of me over the years, particularly after learning that I get along better with my in-laws than she does with her husband's family. Her in-laws have never truly embraced her into their family and apparently still hate her. She tries to put them down by making subtle remarks about my spouse or my in-laws. She expresses her annoyance and discontent with her personal situation through these comments. Helen keeps making these harsh remarks despite my dad's repeated observations of her behavior and his request for her to cease. I was told I was pregnant 4 months ago. My spouse and I are ecstatic about the news. He makes twice as much as I do, so we agreed that I should take a temporary leave of absence to concentrate on the pregnancy. My spouse and my in-laws, who have been quite sympathetic and supportive along this process, fully back this decision. My sister was incensed when she learned that I had chosen to quit my career in order to stay at home with my unborn child. Because they needed both of their earnings to make ends meet, her husband never permitted her to be a stay-at-home mother, which was the source of her rage. Helen never had the opportunity to unwind or take a break during her pregnancy, unlike me. As a result, whenever we get together, she criticizes my choice to express her displeasure. She has referred to me as foolish, and suggested that being a stay-at-home mom is humiliating. On multiple occasions, I have just laughed off her comments and told her that I had years of experience and could go back to work whenever I chose. Helen, however, has attempted to manipulate the issue by claiming that I should never have given up on my profession and that my husband is being domineering. This strikes me as ironic because I chose to leave my job. I am aware that her attempts to discredit my choice are obviously motivated more by her personal discontent with her life than by any genuine criticism of my decisions. I have made every effort to avoid her in order to preserve my mental health and give my whole attention to enjoying my pregnancy. My sister contacted me a week ago to invite me to a dinner party she was throwing. She wanted my spouse and I to go, and she intended to invite her in-laws and our whole family. I viewed this dinner gathering as a welcome diversion and an opportunity to mingle, as I hadn't gone out much since my pregnancy. I was more motivated to go since I reasoned that my sister would probably pay less attention to me with so many people around. Although I consented to go, things didn't work out that night. My spouse had to work late into the night to finish some last-minute chores. He was already under a lot of stress and he kept apologizing to me for being late to work. I didn't hold it against him because I knew that these things may happen. We were already running late for the dinner party when he finally arrived to pick me up. I thought it was better to be late than not at all, so I chose not to cancel despite the delay. As soon as we got to my sister's house, I saw that most of the people there had already eaten dinner and were chatting casually. My dad doesn't feel comfortable driving at night, so even my parents went after supper. My sister chastised us for being late right away, and although I didn't blame her for being irritated, I took the initiative to apologize on my husband's behalf because he was obviously humiliated by the circumstance. I was relieved when Helen ushered my husband to a chair and brought him a plate of food, but she drew me aside and led me into the kitchen. There she disclosed that there was no food left for me because everyone had already consumed their second or even third helping. This realization surprised me, especially since I was already really hungry and felt even more so because I was pregnant. I was disappointed, but I decided not to dispute or voice my displeasure. I told her that I could just order something online because I knew that our tardiness had caused this trouble. I could still eat in this manner without creating any more trouble. It was nice of her to nod and offer to order me something. However, she informed me that the least I could do tonight was wash the dishes because I had arrived so late and hadn't contributed much during the evening. I was surprised when she asked. I sneered and informed her that I hadn't anticipated being asked to work for her just because I was late for the dinner party invitation. Because I was late, I thought it was ridiculous to expect me to clear her visitors' plates. She reacted quickly and angrily. As her sister, I should be helping her, especially since she's been cooking so much all day, she shot out in a low, angry tone. She said that as my mother had assisted her in serving the guests at dinner, I should do the same because I was related. Helen made it clear that she wanted my assistance because her husband was never helpful in the kitchen. I countered that Helen shouldn't have invited so many people if she was feeling overburdened. She responded angrily and contemptuously, telling me that the least I could do was to keep quiet and provide her a hand because I would never be able to comprehend her predicament. In a scathing comment, she went on to say that it wasn't a huge problem if I assisted her as well because, now that I was pregnant, I was just a pathetic waitress for my husband at home. Her scathing remarks caught me off guard and were really painful. The weight of her remarks caused tears to build up in my eyes, adding to my already present feelings of hunger and emotional vulnerability. I hurried into one of Helen's bedrooms and closed the door behind me because I didn't want her to see me in distress. I had to locate a place where I could gather myself. Once inside, the usual feeling of being unable to breathe was overwhelming, and I could feel my old panic attack beginning to re-emerge. I fervently prayed that no one, including my spouse, would notice my misery and pursue me. I needed this alone time to get some peace and regain emotional control. After calming down and giving it some thought, I believed that Helen deserved to be disciplined once and for all because of her constant remarks and the way she continued to treat me. I made the decision to act against her. Finding all the pictures I had taken of my old journals was the first thing I did. I took my journal with me when I left my parents' house, and throughout the years, I began to save pictures of the journal entries in my email so I would always have a copy. I was able to locate pictures of my old journal entries, which described all the humiliations and complaints I had suffered at the hands of my sister years ago, thanks to this. Since my sister was only terrified of my brother-in-law, I decided to send him all the pictures before my husband and I departed that evening. I was aware that my parents would just chastise her for her behavior toward me, but she would never, ever change. I wanted Helen to go through a small portion of the humiliation that her husband rightfully inflicted upon her. I sent him a thorough letter outlining how Helen had been a major bully in my life. Helen had asked me to the dinner party, but I had to clean up after her and the other guests, I wrote in the message. I explained that she seemed to be jealous of my more thoughtful husband, which is why she was upset with me. In the hopes that he might better understand or take action, I tried to give him a clear picture of Helen's behavior and how it had affected me. Bill and Helen got into a heated argument as a result, as you may guess. Bill told our parents that he now saw Helen differently since he couldn't believe she had been harassing me for years. My dad has chosen to be a little more neutral, but my mother fully blames me for their argument since she feels that I went too far by exposing my sister. I have no regrets about letting my sister see her spouse. Update 1. For those who are curious, after learning what my sister said to me at the party, my husband is just as furious with her. He didn't know, but when I told him everything, he called my sister to vent his annoyance and correct her. I've never witnessed him so agitated, and Helen must have been really unsettled by his response. Additionally, he has made it very apparent to her that she should stop talking about our family going forward, especially since she is unaware of the whole truth. Update 2. My brother-in-law is furious with Helen since his own family has always thought she is egotistical and careless. Throughout their entire marriage, Helen had a tendency to place the blame for any argument or quarrel on everyone but herself. Because he loves her, Bill has been lenient toward her for a long time. But it was really eye-opening for him when I showed him my journal entries. He had never known our complex past, but he had always sensed that Helen and I were not particularly close. He had only witnessed a superficial aspect of our relationship and was ignorant of the seriousness of the problems that had existed between us because Helen had conveniently never told him the truth. His perception of my sister was drastically changed after hearing my side of the tale, which at last filled in a lot of the blanks. It demonstrated even more how accurate his family's assessment of Helen was. Bill told me all of this when he contacted me this week. He also wanted to hear it all straight from my point of view. We had a lengthy phone discussion, and I was more than happy to talk. I described all the hardships I'd gone through as a child, highlighting the way my parents had always given preference to my sister. Before I nearly cut them off after leaving for college, I told my parents how my psychiatrist had attempted to address these problems with them, but they had never admitted their mistakes. My brother-in-law also talked candidly about his own interactions with Helen throughout our talk. He described how she would occasionally treat him similarly, but he had always dismissed it as just her being herself. Even though he was aware of his own shortcomings in their relationship, he was shocked to learn about the ways she had harassed me over the years, even as an adult. It has truly caused him to reconsider their relationship as a whole. Helen may be acting harshly toward their child behind his back, which worries him as well. Update 3. For the final time, I'm answering some of your questions. After the party, my sister wrote me a number of angry texts and, of course, blamed me for everything. My husband had to step in and stop her. She hasn't contacted me or spoken to me since. Second, my mom has insisted that I inform Bill that I over-exaggerated the events from my early years and apologize. I adamantly declined, stating that my husband and I would cut her off if she persisted in endorsing my sister's position. But my father knows why I did what I did. Finally, I'm not sure what Bill will decide about his connection with Helen. My ultimate objective was to expose my sister and show her that she couldn't continue to get away with disparaging me. I have absolutely no regrets about what I did. Bill is now entirely responsible for determining what is best for his future. My sister sabotaged my wedding. And now, with her struggles to conceive, my parents want her to share my baby. As a little background, my sister Pam, 30F, persuaded our parents and a few of our family members not to come to my wedding. She believed it was inappropriate for me to marry her while she was divorcing. She turned to lying and spreading rumors to get people to avoid me because the truth alone wasn't enough to make them hate me. My spouse and I recently shared on social media that I am currently in my second trimester of pregnancy. I am 27F. My parents and Pam learned about it in this way, and after we had not spoken for over 3 years, they tried to mend things with me. Why? Pam is sadly unable to conceive due to her infertility. Despite the fact that she has failed multiple IVF cycles, she is adamant about trying again. Pam does not believe that surrogacy or adoption are the best options for her at this time. Since I'm expecting a child, my parents thought it would be beneficial to make amends with Pam so she could spend time with a child who is not directly linked to her. They even proposed that the child have 2 mothers, saying that this would benefit me because I would receive more assistance. My parents really only want to pretend to be a happy family, now that Pam is unable to have children of her own. During the call, I was able to see through their phony politeness. I informed them that I would not accept this idea and that it was completely irrational to expect me to comply. To be honest, it was ridiculous that they even believed I would think about letting Pam act as the mother of my future child. I clarified that they shouldn't have done it because I was expecting a baby and they wanted to give Pam a plaything, but rather because they truly loved me and were sorry for how they treated me. They took issue at what I said, claiming that Pam was prepared to volunteer for her future niece or nephew and that they were just providing assistance because they knew I would require assistance when the kid was born. They said I was being too harsh and that it was all perfectly innocent. I replied that my husband and in-laws were already providing me with all the assistance I required because I was the mother. They should keep avoiding me in the future if it was easy for them to do so in the past. Here's where I might have gone too far. I suggested that Pam might not be able to conceive because she was a horrible person and wouldn't be a good mother. My parents, a few family members, and of course Pam herself sent me a ton of texts after that call. They all demand that I should apologize to them, claiming that what I said was needless and unkind. I shouldn't kick people when they're already down, they say. The issue is that I can still clearly recall every event leading up to my wedding, and I harbor deep animosity toward Pam for her actions. I find it hard to feel bad about what I said. To put things in perspective, while I was organizing my wedding, Pam had already been married for 2 years. Prior to their marriage, she and her ex-husband had been dating for 3 years, and she had always understood his desire to live a childless life. When they began talking about their future after a year of dating, it was among the first things she brought up to our parents. Even though I was in the room at the time, they continued their chat as usual, acting as though I wasn't there. Another problem is that even as a child, Pam and I have never gotten along. She has always been the beloved daughter of our parents. When we were younger, we used to quarrel a lot, but eventually we just learned to ignore one another. She therefore knew for a fact that she wanted children in the future, even if she was telling our parents that her ex-boyfriend preferred a childless existence. In the end, they agreed to bring up the subject again when they were married, and she hoped that by then, he would have changed his mind. She tried to persuade him to have children, but he refused to change his views, and they started fighting a lot. She would frequently look very distraught at family gatherings and tell about how hard it was to stay with him all the time. Her decision to wed a man who had made it apparent that he didn't want children was, in my opinion, her fault. It was she who thought she could make him reconsider. However, she had no right to hold him responsible when she was unable to. Naturally, I kept all of this to myself since I knew it would just cause more problems. I tried to persuade him for a few months before my parents informed me that Pam had returned to live with them permanently following a heated argument with her husband. They told me there was no way out of it at this point. My spouse and I had just begun making deposits for our wedding at this point. After almost 4 years of dating, we had been engaged for a few months. We had waited until we were both comfortable in our employment, even though we had been prepared for marriage for a while. My parents therefore told me that they wanted me to put off my wedding forever when they told me that Pam and her husband were going to divorce. They didn't want me to marry Pam at the same time she was divorcing in order to offend her. They said that Pam already had it difficult because she had to postpone her intentions to have a baby. They said that I should not forward with my wedding in order to spare her feelings because she truly wanted to become a mother. It was likely the most ridiculous and inconsiderate thing they had ever tried to get me to do. I informed them, of course, that I would not delay my wedding for Pam. Whether she liked it or not, I was going to marry. Since we were never close, I didn't care what she thought about my wedding. But my choice did not sit well with my parents. They were upset because I wasn't prepared to put their beloved daughter's sentiments ahead of my own wedding arrangements. They warned me that they wouldn't go if I didn't postpone the wedding. I knew my parents had a soft place for Pam, but I never imagined they would go to such lengths for her, so that was incredibly upsetting and devastating to me. Nevertheless, I accepted it and informed them that they may do as they pleased. Pam wasn't content, even though it should have been the end of it. She didn't like that I was getting married, so she made sure the rest of the family didn't come either. She initially only tried to win people over by saying that it was rude of me to get married while she was going through such a difficult period. Although the majority expressed sympathy for her, they did not specifically state that they would not attend my wedding. She made the decision to step it up after realizing this. She began spreading stories about me because the truth wasn't contentious enough. Pam started claiming that I had been persuading her husband to divorce her because I was envious of her and couldn't bear the idea of her having a child before me. I had never been friends with her spouse, so the allegations were ridiculous. If he and I had ever gotten close, I genuinely doubt Pam would have married him at all. People began to believe her, though, for some reason. She even claimed that I had been bothering her by convincing her spouse that he would be happier without her and manipulating him to leave her. Pam claims that I was to blame for his lack of desire for children since I had reportedly persuaded him that having no children was the way to go for our generation. All of it was false. I assume she lied so firmly that others started to believe her, even though I hadn't really engaged with my brother-in-law when he was married to Pam. Many folks turned down my wedding invites. A couple of my supportive cousins and other family members told me about Pam's comments, so I already knew why. I wasn't shocked to learn that no one provided me with a detailed explanation for their refusal. Only a few relatives and a few individuals from my side of the family came to my wedding. Everyone else was either a friend or a co-worker. On the bride's side, the attendance was dreadfully poor. In the weeks before the wedding, I recall being really furious about all of this. Many individuals had already made up their minds, and some had even blocked me, but I knew I could try talking to them and being honest. I didn't bother because it would have been my word against hers. Fortunately, my spouse, friends, and in-laws were there to support me on the wedding day. I barely noticed that so many of my family members weren't present because they made sure I had so much fun. I haven't forgiven Pam for what she did though, simply because I had a good time on my wedding day. She was vengeful and vicious in what she did. She made sure I wasn't happy just because she didn't get her way, which was quite typical of her. She had been like way since she was a child, but most people get over those habits, especially by the time they are in their late 20s. Regretfully, I am unable to say the same for her. I cut her and my parents off entirely after that incident, and my animosity toward them only deepened. I saw Pam's ex-husband for the first time since their divorce around a year later. One day while my husband and I were out to lunch, we noticed him eating with some of his coworkers. We weren't expecting him to greet us, so it was a little awkward, but he approached our table, congratulated us on our wedding, and expressed regret for not being there. He clarified that it was because of my sister's predicament. We were also courteous because he was chit-chatting, and my husband even made a joke about how he might as well have come because Pam didn't show up. Pam's ex-husband then appeared truly perplexed. At that point, we began discussing the events leading up to the wedding. He revealed how Pam had repeatedly postponed the mediation sessions and postponed the divorce by claiming she was too preoccupied with getting ready for my wedding. When her ex-husband learned she hadn't even gone, he became perplexed. Her sudden interest in my wedding had surprised him, but he had refrained from confronting her because he didn't want to accuse her of postponing the divorce out of fear. He just dealt with everything as calmly as he could. We discussed the facts after he gave us his version of events, which included Pam's failure to attend the wedding, her spreading false information about me, and her accusation that I was attempting to end her marriage. After expressing his shock that Pam would act in such a manner, he revealed the true cause of their split. It was a far deeper issue than a dispute over having kids. After months of arguments about whether or not to have children, her ex-husband finally began to take her point of view into consideration and was on the verge of changing his mind. She told him something that made all the difference the day he made the decision to talk to her about it. She appeared ecstatic when he informed her that he was at last prepared to think about being a parent. Then, in what she believed to be a jest, she said that he would have had to accept it sooner rather than later, even if he hadn't been prepared. She acknowledged that she had surreptitiously stopped taking her birth control pills without notifying him when he asked her to explain. She might have gotten pregnant if they had kept going that way, making plans for him to simply deal with it. He was unable to accept this perverse scheme. She had deceived us into believing that their disagreements were solely about having children, but in reality, their most recent dispute had been about her treachery. Pam made an effort to make it seem lighthearted, but it didn't make her actions any less serious. In essence, she was attempting to trick him into becoming pregnant so that he would be forced to accept the pregnancy at any time. My husband and I were more clearer on why she had behaved so erratically around the time of our wedding after that talk with her ex-husband. She was aware that she was to blame for her divorce. She could have kept it to herself and none of this would have occurred, even if she had taken the risky decision to stop taking her birth control. She may have even given birth to a child with her spouse, but she ruined everything for herself before venting her frustration on me. I became much more resentful of her after discovering all of this. I had the option of telling my parents and other family members the truth, but I decided against it. I had already severed my connections with people who hadn't been at my wedding by that point, and to be honest, I just wanted to get on with my life. I made the decision to remain silent and continue. But to be honest, I don't feel bad about what I said because I hate her so much. I genuinely think it's fortunate that she hasn't been able to have children because I don't think someone with her personality could be a decent mother. The fact that she and my parents only contacted me because I am pregnant and they wish to play happy family with my unborn child further bothers me. That simply will not occur. Regarding the notion of my child having two mothers, I concur with my in-laws and my spouse that it is not essential. People's reactions to my comment, especially those with whom I get along, are the only reason I'm even slightly unsure. So am I the jerk for suggesting that my sister might not make a good mother, which is why she hasn't been able to conceive? In response to inquiries, Pam has not remarried and, to the best of my knowledge, is not currently seeing anyone. Although I don't know much about her personal life, I've learned from friends and family that she is totally unmarried and that her primary goal at the moment is to have children. You can guess why she isn't interested in adopting a child or using a surrogate. In my opinion, it's because she feels that a child isn't truly your child unless you've given birth to it yourself. She has been trying for over 3 years, including when she tried to conceive with her spouse and when she used donors for IVF following the divorce. So far, nothing has worked for her. Most people would think about other choices by now, but she isn't interested, and that's her decision. The fact that she and my parents only tried to reconcile after I revealed my pregnancy is what truly seems odd. The remark about two mothers stuck with me. Additionally, you all observed that they made particular reference to the fact that this baby would be linked to her by blood. Technically speaking, my child would be her blood relative because she is my biological sister. However, bringing it up while trying to make amends is odd, and their actions simply gave off a disturbing, almost baby stealer atmosphere. I'm afraid she'll start projecting and acting like the mother if I do try to forgive her and give her some contact with my child. I can't allow that to occur. Some of you have questioned why I haven't defended myself in front of the rest of the family or spoken out about the true cause of her divorce. In all honesty, I don't believe it's worth it. I became aware of my true friends and supporters after the wedding. Everything that transpired deeply wounded me, and even though I wanted to speak out about the truth, I decided against it. I wanted to be left alone. Even a few family members with whom I get along well said that I was a little callous when I told Pam that she couldn't have children. Although they don't expect me to apologize, they do believe it was a little too severe. These folks have always stood behind me, so that's why I'm worried. If they too think I was too severe, then maybe I should be worried. Update 1. I appreciate all of the comments left on my post. I appreciate your support, even though it seems like most of you believe I'm NTA. I will continue to ignore Pam and my parents, and I have made the decision not to apologize to them. They are obviously unhappy about this. On social media and in real life, they are acting like the victim and disparaging me in front of our family members once more. I already don't talk to those people, so I'm not bothered by it. What could possibly go wrong? That they will further isolate me. I made the decision to talk to my family members that support me yet disagree with my remark and address it. Almost everyone in the family is aware of what happened and what I said, and Pam and my parents have made a big issue out of it. I reached out to people who truly care about me since I won't engage with someone I don't get along with. I admitted to them that, in the heat of the moment, I had uttered those things. However, that doesn't change the fact that Pam's deliberate attempt to draw attention to herself during my wedding was much worse. For years, Pam has been mean and disrespectful to me, and I won't say I'm sorry for something that might even be true. She won't be significantly impacted by my remark, at least not in the same manner that she did me when she created rumors. Because of what she said, my family declined to come to my wedding. It's not the same thing because my viewpoint won't stop her from being pregnant. Those who were on my side are still supportive, and my relatives seem to understand this. I'm okay with them deciding not to talk about it anymore. All I want is for my pregnancy to be a joyful and healthy one. I hope this tension between Pam and my parents ends quickly. I don't want them to stretch this out because I might have to tell them some things they won't like. This is something I really don't want to deal with, especially now that I'm expecting. Update 2. My parents have been playing the victim and informing everyone in the family about what I said for the past 2 weeks since I last spoke to them on the phone. They have been pleading with others to avoid me, to never communicate with me again, and even to cut me off from family members that get along well with me. They basically want me shunned by the entire family. My parents haven't been successful in their strategy though, because as I indicated, I was able to work things out with the people I care about. They obviously didn't like it, so they posted disparaging remarks about me on social media. I am aware that the posts are about me even if they haven't specifically mentioned me. They have been discussing a particular relative who has always tried to ruin lives, and always been jealous of Pam. That's why I allegedly made fun of her infertility, they say. I knew it was all lies, so at first I didn't care. But it really got to me when they recently posted that I was the one who destroyed Pam's marriage. I chose to reply since they were repeating the same falsehoods they had told me around the time of my wedding. I made contact with my former brother-in-law. Even if we don't communicate frequently, We are on speaking terms because we still greet one another on holidays and on our birthdays. I told him everything that had been going on and asked if he would mind if I told the truth in public. I did what he told me to do. The drama has escalated since I wrote about Pam's actions and the true cause of their divorce. Although I haven't spoken to anyone directly, family members have been calling, texting, and emailing me to ask whether it's true, to ask me to remove the post, and even to accuse me of lying about Pam once more. None of them have received a response from me. My parents and Pam, on the other hand, have remained remarkably silent, which suggests that they have little to defend themselves. They'll find words though, I'm sure. Even after all of this, it's disheartening that no one in the family has bothered to apologize to me, but it's okay since it's exactly what I anticipated. I believe I've been successful in exposing Pam for who she truly is, which was my major objective. I'm just going to relax and observe what happens next. Update 3. Pam and my parents finally contacted me a few days after my last post, stating that they were prepared to apologize. But only if I consented to have my post removed. The rest of the family hasn't expressed regret to me, but they seem to have contacted my parents and Pam to criticize their actions. They told my parents that it was unfair to portray me negatively when Pam was ultimately to blame for her divorce. My relationships with my parents have suffered greatly as a result of their years of deceiving the family. It's amazing how fast certain family members went from detesting me to betraying Pam. However, as I already stated, I don't hold it in high regard for those who assumed that I was the cause of Pam's marital issues. They're now equally eager to assume that she was at fault from the beginning. They still refuse to say sorry, and the majority of them have ceased getting in touch with me. No one is requesting me to remove the post, and no one is interested in knowing if I was speaking the truth. I replied to Pam and my parents that I would wait to remove the post until I felt like it. I don't care about their apologies anymore. I responded to their email correspondence and subsequently blocked them. They haven't made an attempt to get in touch with me since, but this morning I made the decision to remove the post, not for them, but rather because I don't want my social media accounts to be overflowing with posts about unimportant people. Retaliation isn't beneficial, and as I mentioned, I want a pleasant and healthy pregnancy journey. Furthermore, I believe that's sufficient punishment for Pam and my parents because they are who they are. I have family and friends who truly care about me, and my spouse and I are content. I really only need that. It doesn't really matter what my sister and parents are doing these days. I hope they understand after everything that has transpired that I don't want to interact with them ever again and avoid me. That's all I have to say, and considering everything that has happened, I doubt they will get in touch anytime soon. I'm grateful to everyone who has helped me, answered my messages and given me guidance. It is really important to me. My husband just uncovered secrets from my past, and now I'm terrified our marriage might be over. Original post. I'll try and keep this short. We've known each other for 5 years, been married for 2 years, and up until last weekend things were perfectly fine. Maybe once in a while we'd bicker about money or something, but 99% of the time we were happy together. While out last weekend for a friend's birthday, a now ex-friend of mine told my husband about a relationship I had in college. My husband knew about my college boyfriend, but obviously I didn't share intimate details about our sex life. Well, it came out that I used to engage in threesomes with him and his male roommate. Probably 12, 15 in total, but all my husband knows is that it was more than once. College was a totally different time in my life. I was drinking every weekend, doing recreational drugs every month, partying, having casual flings, just like everyone else at that age. It was a hedonistic live-for-today lifestyle that I thankfully grew out of. I look back on those years with a lot of regrets, and not just about my sex life. I mean, it was 10 plus years ago. I'm a totally different person now. Regardless, I know my husband sees me in a totally different light. He hasn't slept in our bed since he found out, and he's barely spoken to me all week. I'm so scared he'll divorce me. I'm walking on eggshells just trying to stay out of his way while he works through this. I really want to sit him down and clear the air, I just don't know where to begin. I feel like one slip of the tongue and our relationship could be completely over. I know I'm not a good person for keeping this from him, so please don't lecture me. It was a chapter of my life I'd thought I'd closed for good. It was my one secret, and I honestly debated telling him about it but came to the conclusion that no positive outcome could come from it. TLDR, my husband, SM34 of 2 years found out some of my F31 sexual exploits in college. He has barely talked to me since he found out, and I'm afraid our relationship might be finished over something I did 10 years ago before I even knew him. Relevant comments. Commenter. People don't change that much. It could be that he just simply knows more about how you view sex now, and it may not be compatible with his own views. Pulling a three-way with two dudes, 10, 15 times? That's a whole lot of sucking and fucking. It shows a lot about how you like to be treated and what you crave. I honestly don't blame him for being creeped out about that. OOP, most times there was drugs or alcohol involved. It's not something I'd ever want to do at this age. Like I said, it was a lifetime ago. Puch 80. Is your husband upset that you used to be sexually adventurous because he has a moral problem with it? Or is it because you are not sexually adventurous with him? And I don't just mean having threesomes. I mean fun, passionate sex. OOP, he's never complained about our sex life. I didn't want to go into explicit detail, but people are asking and it's an anonymous account, so here it goes. My main limitation is that I won't do anal, which I know he enjoys. It's just not pleasurable and often painful for me. I don't like him coming on my face. Body is fine, in me is fine. And, not that he's ever asked, I'm done with group sex for good. Deleted. Honestly, I don't think you've done anything wrong, and if this, something that occurred when he wasn't in your life whatsoever, is a deal breaker for him, then you're better off. He's being a childish idiot about it. The past was meant to stay in the past, and I don't believe you were obligated to talk to him about your sexual exploits with previous partners. The way he is acting is ridiculous. I understand he may be bothered by it, but wow, handle it like a man, dude. OOP, I'm not better off without him. This is the man I love, we've built a life together. A divorce would completely ruin my life. How did her husband find out the information? He was talking to an old friend of mine on a night where we were all drinking. My friend claims it was a drunken slip of the tongue, but she has a history of pulling shit like this. I'm 100% done with her, I no longer consider her a friend. OOP added, no, I came to Reddit because I'm looking to save my marriage and don't want to discuss this with friends, family. Update, as of this morning, we still hadn't slept in the same bed or spoken more than 10 words to each other in passing. As I was waking up, he was walking in the front door with 2 coffees. He sat me down at our kitchen table and finally opened up to me. Basically, he feels that he was conned, his word, into the marriage, saying that he wouldn't have even dated me, let alone married me, if he'd known what he knows now. His view of me has been irreparably changed and he no longer sees me as someone worthy of being his wife. Quoting him here, loving prick. Beyond the sexual aspect, he says he no longer trusts me because I kept something this big from him our whole relationship. Nothing I could do or say could convince him that these were past mistakes and not reflective of who I am today. He wasn't angry with me, didn't call me a slut or anything like that. Never once raised his voice. Part of me wishes he did, although I can't exactly say why right now. It felt like I was being laid off from a job. So that's it. We are getting divorced. My supposed life partner turned his back on me without a second thought. He didn't even have the decency to discuss it with me first. Apparently he visited his lawyer during the week and the process is in motion. His words. Knowing him, there is absolutely no changing his mind. My husband owns multiple businesses and wouldn't get married without a prenup. I signed it, honest to God, thinking we'd never, ever have to use it. Well, he had the loving document with him this morning. He said he'd pay off the remainder of my student loans, which he isn't legally obligated to do. While I appreciate that, I am going to meet with my lawyer this week and see if the agreement can be challenged in court. We have built a life together. I gave him 5 of the best years of my life and I've been 100% faithful to him. I don't deserve to be tossed out like a piece of trash. So that's it. My life turned upside down in the span of a week, over something I did 10 plus years ago before I even knew him. It's loving asinine. The thing is, even as I wrote the original post, in the back of my mind I knew he was through with me. He's ended friendships and business partnerships over less. TLDR, my husband finally spoke to me and is apparently proceeding with a divorce. Relevant comments. Deleted 1. I'm curious, why are you looking to challenge the prenup in court? Do you feel that you have a right to his assets or money from his businesses, or are you just being a vengeful person? Were you an investor or founding member of any of these projects with him? Were you instrumental in their development and success in any material way? Don't give me this emotional support crap. The whole time you were supposedly emotionally supporting him, he was using the proceeds from his businesses to provide for you. That's the deal in a marriage. Now that the marriage is ending, the monetary support from his businesses is going to be cut off from you. He's being generous by offering to pay off your loans. It sounds like you're just being a spiteful bitch looking to suck as much of his money as the legal system will allow. Deleted 2. It's within her rights to contest it and the courts will decide whether she has a case or not. OOP exactly. What do I have to lose? To protect his fragile ego, I have to start my life over at square one. I'll probably have to move in with my parents. I don't even know if I'll have a car by summer. I get why he's mad. I totally get it. He just didn't even give us a chance. He doesn't know our relationship won't work out. He didn't even try. He ran straight to his lawyer and exercised a contingency agreement without even talking to me. He's taking the coward's way out and it destroys my life in the process. Macaroni and milk. I seriously don't know what the fuck is going on in this thread where the devoted comments are about how it's all on you because you're a fucking liar. This is the same subreddit that will tell most posters that their sexual past is no one else's business, barring diseases or sex work. Maybe these people only read your update and assumed you hid both of those from him. I don't know. Either way, you did nothing wrong. If your sexual past was such a big deal for him, he should have asked you some questions. Not just assumed you were some pure little angel living in a bubble just waiting for this one specific man to come whisk you away. If having a sexual past is a deal breaker and he didn't question you, that's on him. Not you. Lawyer up, make the split, and go find some guy who won't judge you for actions that happened 15 years ago and have no bearing on him whatsoever. OOP never said I was a virgin. We met when I was like 25, come on. Anytime I mentioned an ex-boyfriend, not sexually, just in conversation, like, oh, I went to destination with ex-boyfriend, he'd get pissy and unhappy. He never came out and said it, but I could tell it made him uncomfortable. So early on in our relationship, I made the conscious decision to stop talking about my past boyfriends completely. My mom constantly warns my daughter will become obese, but she's actually underweight, and it's wearing me down. Original post. So like it says in the title, I have a daughter, Leah, who is 5. She's strong and healthy, but slightly underweight for her height. She's been this way since she was a toddler. She seems to take after her dad, who is also very tall and thin. Leah eats plenty of healthy food and gets lots of activity, and we see her pediatrician regularly. He has told us that her weight is not an issue as long as she continues to eat well. The problem is my mother, who is convinced my daughter is going to become obese. While I serve healthy food most of the time, I do occasionally let my daughter have McDonald's for lunch or ice cream after dinner. Every time I do this when my mother is around, she makes dire comments about how Leah is going to get fat. If Leah mentions she had a hot dog for dinner, my mom says something about the childhood obesity epidemic. If she sees me giving Leah a cookie, she shakes her head and says something about how Leah seems to be packing on the pounds. To her credit, she never says these things in front of Leah, but around me she never stops. The thing is, I am overweight and have been since I was a kid. Not obese, but definitely heavier than I should be. Although there are a lot of reasons for this and I know that the responsibility for my health is ultimately mine alone, I think my mother's unhealthy attitudes toward food have played a large part in my weight problems. She would tell me I was disgusting and needed to lose weight, then turn around and give me a cupcake if I had a bad day at school. Food was the enemy, but also my main source of consolation. This led to me becoming an emotional eater, a problem I still struggle with today. I have gone to therapy and made major changes in my lifestyle to become a good role model for my daughter, and I am losing my excess weight. I talk regularly with Leah about nutrition and exercise, but I refuse to place the same value judgments on food and weight that my mother did. I have told my mother, repeatedly, that Leah is healthy and happy and is not in danger of becoming obese, and that I want her to stop making comments, but she can't seem to help herself. I have warned her that if she starts making them in front of Leah that I will cut her off in a heartbeat, but Leah loves her grandma and I would hate to end their relationship over something that is really only bothering me. Can anyone think of a way to get my mom to lay off? Update. Okay, you've all convinced me that I need to put my foot down with my mom and tell her that her comments need to stop entirely or she won't see me and Leah anymore. I'm supposed to see her tomorrow, so I'll post an update after. Thanks Reddit, I really needed to be smacked in the face with reality, and you did it in an admirably gentle way. TL.dr. My mom constantly tells me my perfectly healthy daughter is going to become obese. I'm sick of hearing it but don't know how to get her to stop. Pariah Bear 790. Maybe a trial run where your daughter does not see your mother for an extended period of time, 2 weeks or something. In the meantime, tell your mother how you feel and let that sink in for her. Right now it's concerning comments made to you. Eventually it will be private conversations between Leah and her grandmother. OOP, that is my main concern. I have told her point blank that if I ever hear her mentioning Leah's weight or eating habits to Leah, I will not hesitate to cut off contact. I will not have my daughter raised with the same eating issues I had. I do think she will respect this, because she loves Leah, only grandchild, and knows I am serious about this. OOP when asked if there's any truth to the mother's comments. It's a fair question, but yes, I'm sure there isn't any truth to the comments. Leah's doctor was the one who characterized her as a little underweight. At her last checkup she was in the 95th percentile for height but down around the 40th percentile for weight. If a kid with those stats is considered overweight, I'd hate to see a kid they consider to be at a healthy weight. Update. Thanks for all the responses you gave me on my first post. I think I needed a dose of reality, and that's what I got. After reading all the comments I realized I needed to talk to my mom. So when she came over, before she had a chance to say anything about Leah's eating habits, I took her aside and said, "Enough. Leah is healthy and happy, and your weight comments are inappropriate. They stress me out and they're bad for Leah. If you keep making them, we're just not going to see you anymore." She sputtered a bit, but ultimately agreed to my terms. I was hopeful that maybe she would actually stop making the comments so we could have a somewhat normal relationship and she could continue to see Leah. Ha ha ha. I work a part-time schedule of 2 days per week and every other weekend. This was my working weekend, so my husband was home with Leah. When I got home after work on Sunday, I could tell something was up. Leah was already in bed and my husband looked really tense. He's usually a pretty laid-back guy, so this was weird. When I asked what was up, he said we needed to talk about my mother. I had told him that I had spoken with her and that she had been warned not to make any more comments about Leah's weight. Well, apparently she just couldn't do it, because she called him, knowing I was at work, that day and told him that I was blind to Leah's problem and that he needed to get involved because I had confided in her that Leah's pediatrician told me she was at serious risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes and that we needed to change her diet so she would lose weight. What? For the record, Leah's pediatrician has never said anything like that. In fact, as I mentioned in my last post, he has told me that she is underweight. Fortunately, my husband A attends all Leah's doctor appointments and B has the sense to realize that a rail-thin child isn't edging toward obesity, so he knew it was bunk. He told my mom that she wasn't to call again until she heard from me. Well, I was livid. It was like after years and years of weight-related crap from my mom something finally snapped. I called her and the minute she said hello I just lit into her. I told her that based on her behavior she was either delusional or a manipulative sociopath, and that either way she wasn't allowed around me or my kid again. I told her she was not welcome to call, email, come over or send cards. Basically, we were going to pretend like she didn't exist. I hung up before she had a chance to get a word in edgewise. She called 15 times that night. I finally blocked her number on my cell and my husband's. We don't have a landline, so this means she can't call us at all. I had 3 emails in my inbox the next morning, which I deleted without reading before blocking her email address as well. Finally, we had given her a key to our house for emergency purposes, so first thing yesterday I had the locks changed, then took Leah out for the day. Lo and behold, when we came home my neighbor said that my mom, she recognizes her because she used to come over a lot, had been banging on the door for almost half an hour earlier that day before storming off in a huff. I can only imagine how angry she was when she realized her key didn't work anymore. I feel better than I have in years, which makes me think I did the right thing. The only thing I'm still struggling with is how to break the news to Leah. She really does love Grandma. My husband and I are going to sit down with her tonight, so I guess I have until then to figure out what to say. TL.dr. Confronted Mom, who was even crazier than I expected. Relevant comments. Happy duck potato. It sure didn't take long for her to not only not make comments, but to escalate it to OP's husband with lies that are easily shot down. She must be really delusional, which will most likely mean she won't back down to the no contact easily. OP, this is what concerns me. If she has any grip on reality at all, she would realize that my husband wouldn't believe her lies. Either she's actually lost it or she's playing some kind of game by saying that to him. Happy duck potato. I'm curious, what is her own relationship with food? Is she overweight? OP, she's not. But she definitely doesn't have a good relationship with food. She counts every calorie and tries a lot of fad diets to keep her weight down. Her attitude, which I think she got from her own mom, is almost like weight is a moral issue. Being overweight isn't just unhealthy, it means you're a bad person. My family treated me unfairly, favoring my twin. In the end, she used lies and manipulation to steal my fiancé. Life has a tendency of catching you off guard, don't you think? I, 35F, never imagined that I would be here, sharing my heart on Reddit at the age of 35. The idea that my fiancé, the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with, married my estranged twin sister after just a week of getting to know her, still baffles me. What brought me here? Everything's a lengthy and agonizing tale, but I must let everything out. I suppose I ought to begin at the beginning. To put it mildly, My twin sister and I have had a complex family dynamic for as long as I can remember. My sister was obviously the star child from a young age. You would assume that parents would treat twins equally, wouldn't they? False. In our family, my sister always came first and I came second. When we were young, it began with modest things. My sister always had the first choice when our parents bought us clothes or toys. She would always make the first choice, leaving me with anything she didn't like, even if the products were identical but different in color. I would be lectured about selfishness, how the gifts were the same anyway, and how acting entitled would make me never get far in life if I ever objected. The preference increased in intensity as we aged. I'll admit that I resented my sister for enjoying the attention and pampering. We were never close, and as we started middle school, our distance from one another only grew. She began hanging out with the cool kids, and distanced herself from our group of friends. I could at least have my buddies to myself and find some quiet at school, so in a way this was better for me. The distance between my sister and I continued to widen throughout middle and high school. By the time we graduated, our social networks and areas of interest had entirely changed. Because I would be interacting with her less, this worked for me. Although she continued to be cruel, particularly at school when she tried to appear cool to her peers, I had grown accustomed to her conduct by that point and was not particularly bothered by it. Things between us became so bad at the conclusion of high school that there was no turning back. I knew exactly what I wanted to accomplish with my life, so I put a lot of effort into my college applications. In addition, I wanted to stay up with my pals, who were all striving for top schools. Since I wasn't interested in finding out, I never inquired about my sister's essay preparation. However, for someone who wasn't ready or didn't seem to know what she wanted to do, she exuded far too much confidence in her admissions. I was devastated to learn that she was accepted to my ideal school, but I was not. Even though I was sad, I felt uneasy. I discovered, just in time, that she had stolen my work and turned it in as her own after doing some research. I was enraged. As usual, my parents would have told me to suck it up and that nothing could be done now, so I didn't want to inform them. I had had enough of being polite and being trampled. I made the decision to go nuclear. I sent the university an email outlining her plagiarism and proving that the material was actually mine. Additionally, I informed them of the circumstances at home and asked that they use caution when responding to her. They did, however, reply and put her on a blacklist after discovering that she had plagiarized during the application process. She sat stunned when she received the email and gave me such a hateful look that I thought I would pass out. However, she was unable to tell her parents anything. That she stole my essay. What could she have said? I was more than happy that she was finally receiving the credit she deserved, even though I knew I had put her in a difficult situation. I'll confess that it was stressful and, to me at least, a little funny. She was aware of my actions and I was aware of hers. She was unable to go because it would require her to acknowledge that she had stolen my work, and I didn't want to go to my parents for a resolution. Unfortunately for her, this injustice devastated her parents. They insisted that there was no plagiarism involved, and were resolved to bring it up with the university. It became messy at this point. When my parents emailed the institution, they received a thorough response regarding her application and the work, my work, from which she had stolen. I mistakenly thought that after they witnessed what their beloved daughter had done to me, they would finally accept her for who she truly was, and perhaps, just possibly, I would start to play a significant role in the family. The exact reverse was what took place. I spent days being scolded for intentionally destroying my sister's life and profession. They chose someone to harass as soon as they discovered that I was the one who had reported the plagiarism. She stole my work, but that didn't matter. The fact that she was at fault didn't matter. The fact that she prevented me from attending my ideal school didn't matter. The fact that I had exposed her without their knowledge was all that mattered. They called me all kinds of names and stated that talking to them about it would have been the right thing to do, after which they would have come up with a solution. I informed them that letting her leave without any consequences would have been their only option, and I would have been told to accept it and apply somewhere else. My home was a wreck and nobody wanted to hear my side of the story. It was now obvious that I would always be the fall guy and that my sister would never be held accountable for anything she did. I was just waiting for college, but the following few months were terrible. I knew that as soon as I left the house, I would never return. In any case, there was nothing to return to, so I did just that. I instantly stopped communicating with my sister and my parents after leaving for college. After her little incident, she was dead to me, and I had no intention of ever seeing her again. Going to college was a welcome adjustment. I worked hard, had a good life and made good friends. Determining to succeed on my own without assistance from my family, I immersed myself into my studies and extracurricular activities. I met around this period, and we remained friends for a few years. We had the same group of friends, even though he was my senior in college. He asked me to be his girlfriend just before he graduated, and I accepted. Since he was one of my best friends and I enjoyed spending time with him, I thought a relationship would be the natural next step. He informed me that he had been crushing on me for years and had been trying to have the guts to ask me out until I said yes. Sincerely, I thought this was cute and informed him that even if he had asked me sooner, I would have said yes. For what it's worth, our connection was good. We knew each other well because we were already close friends. A certain amount of ease and candor was present and it just happened. I also told him about my family's whole predicament. I clarified that nothing could ever force me to speak to my sister again and that I had very little contact with either of my parents. I requested that he honor that. His family is picture perfect, therefore he found it ridiculous that a family could be so dysfunctional. He is the eldest of 4 siblings, all of whom are supportive and close, and his parents are deeply in love. He has never experienced my ordeal. I liked and appreciated the familial dynamic he came from, and I respected that. The affection they had for one another was really sweet. I couldn't help but feel a little envious because I had never had it. But because he couldn't imagine dysfunctional families, I made it plain to him that he should never expect me to return to my family and attempt to make things right. I trusted him since he appeared fine with it. I had no idea that this would turn out to be my worst life decision. I concentrated on developing my career after college. I was resolved to show myself, and if I'm being completely honest, my family, that I could be successful without their help or connections. I put myself into my work and worked my way up the corporate ladder. I had a prosperous marketing career, a great downtown apartment and a circle of close friends who had become my adopted family by the time I was in my early 30s. We both decided to take things slowly, but and I kept dating. Neither of us felt the need to rush into marriage because we were both focused on our careers. I felt like I had at last found someone who understood and supported me, and the arrangement was comfortable. Proposed to me 2 years ago when I was 33. Yes, of course, I said. By that point we had been dating for about 8 years, and I was certain that he was the man I wanted to live my entire life with. His family welcomed me with wide arms when he first introduced me to them. Even though it wasn't biological, I felt like I had a family at last. I formed separate ties with each of his siblings, who were very hospitable, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Even before I married him, I felt like I was a member of the family. The next natural step was marriage, and I was quite content with my life and my relationship. Planning for the wedding, honeymoon, and other details took up the whole year prior to our planned wedding last year. It was a difficult period for our relationship as well as stressful since I recognized then that we had differences and that it would take work to overcome them. Nevertheless, we voluntarily persevered. While deciding on the guest list, we got into one of our most heated arguments. He wanted to invite a large number of people, including his immediate relatives, some uncles, aunts, his siblings' partners, and others, but I wanted a small, private wedding. However, I didn't have any family members I wanted to invite. I informed him that I genuinely didn't want my family near me on my wedding day and that I would only be inviting my friends. He initially agreed, but I could tell he was hesitant. When I asked him if there was an issue, he said that there wasn't, so I dropped it. Nevertheless, he approached me a week later and advised me to invite my family since there would be no wedding without a family present. I gave him a wide-eyed look and informed him that I had always made it plain that my family was not involved in my life. There was no reason to be upset about my parents' absence because they were unaware that I was engaged and that the bride and groom were the only 2 guests required for a wedding. He refused to give up. He said that any arguments I had with them could be put aside for a single day and that his intention was only to invite them to the wedding, not to establish a romantic relationship or extend forgiveness. Any invitation, I informed him, would imply that I wanted to patch things up, and I didn't want to do that. I should have left him there. Looking back, I could tell that he had chosen to hurl this at me even though he claimed to understand my reality and my upbringing, which I had always been open about. But in love, I was a fool. I nearly stopped talking to him after our many arguments, but I knew deep down that we had to come to an agreement. He finally explained to me why he insisted on inviting my family after much back and forth. He claimed that he didn't want his relatives to believe that he was getting married to a woman who didn't get along well with her family. He believed that my parents' absence would reflect negatively on his family, which is highly traditional and has always lived by the family first motto. That was not what he wanted for me. I initially believed his way of thinking to be considerate and caring, but I soon came to see how flawed it was. Since his parents and siblings already knew that I didn't get along with mine, he was more concerned about the impression his family would get, particularly his extended family, Then he was about the psychological effects on me. I should have seen that the show was more important to him than his wife. I paid the price for not doing so. I finally decided to phone my folks after much back and forth, but there was where I crossed the boundary. I informed him that while I would have them there, my sister and no other family members would be present. My family would not be permitted to speak, and there would be no father-daughter dance. He had to put himself in my shoes, and that was the only need for inviting them. Fortunately, he consented, and he was aware that he had little other option. Additionally, I cautioned him against reaching out to people on his own. I would only call and extend an invitation when I thought the time was appropriate. I knew they would make something up and convince my sister to go if I told them too soon, and I couldn't agree to that. To be honest, I also hoped that they might not be able to make it if I told them too late. In this manner, even though I would be technically correct, I would still get my way. I believe M had a suspicion, but even if he had, he remained silent. So that was that. 6 weeks before the wedding, I told my parents, and they assured me that the whole family will undoubtedly be present to support me on this wonderful day. I interrupted them immediately and informed them that my sister would not be attending my wedding in any way. I would take them out myself if they attempted to be cunning and brought her anyhow, even if just the two of them were invited. They attempted to object, claiming that it was the ideal moment for the family to get back together, that I should stop being a baby, that I had gotten my revenge, and that I should be content. Before the wedding, I informed them that this was the only way I would be contacting them. They were aware of the location and the time, and they could attend if they so desired. But I wouldn't think twice about taking the required action if they tried anything. I hung up the phone after that. I was completely mistaken to believe that was a strong enough warning to stop them from making any plans. I should have anticipated that my sister would show up there and cause chaos. She did create a mess, but it was far more extensive than I had anticipated. I need to get this off my chest, yet as I sit here typing this, I can feel the hurt and rage rising within me once more. What happened next was a betrayal so profound and agonizing that it rocked the foundations of the life I had worked so hard to create, and I needed to tell someone, anyone, what happened next. In my upcoming update, I'll continue this. I need some time to gather my thoughts because writing it all at once hurts too much. I appreciate you reading this far. I had no idea that I would be telling my tale in this way, but here we are. I would be grateful to hear your opinions and advice. Right now I feel completely lost. Update 1. A week has passed since my last post, and I'm still in shock about everything that transpired. We appreciate all of your encouraging messages and remarks. I never thought that strangers on the internet would be so generous. Where did I leave off then? Yes, the dreaded family invitation and the wedding planning. In case you're not convinced, things have gotten worse. My parents came into town via plane the week before the wedding. They asked if M and I could meet at their hotel so they could give me something. M persuaded me to go despite my reservations, suggesting that it might be a peace offering. He assured me that he would accompany me and that we would depart as soon as difficulty appeared. I felt sick to my stomach when we got to the motel. I sensed a problem as soon as we entered their room. My twin sister was seated on the bed, grinning smugly, and there she was. Just a few days before my wedding, my parents had ambushed us in the hopes of forcing a family reunion. I went cold. The old emotions of hurt, betrayal, and rage returned with a vengeance. M put his hand on my back when he could tell I was upset, but it didn't help much. With her arms extended as though the past 15 years of separation didn't matter, my mother took a stand. We thought it was time to move on from the past, she remarked, her voice brimming with fake tenderness. Your sister wants to talk to you about something. My sister got up and began what seemed like a prepared statement before I could respond. I apologize for what happened with the college application, and I know I hurt you, she started. I've regretted that ever since I was foolish and young. I gave a sour laugh. Young and dim-witted? We weren't 8, we were 18. You were fully aware of what you were doing. My father added in a firm tone. Now, let's avoid bringing up previous points of contention. As a family, we are here to move forward. I looked to M expecting him to support me and remind them of our wedding deal, but he was silent and had a serious look on his face. I trembled as I murmured, may we go now? After he paused, he said something that completely shocked me. Perhaps we ought to listen to them. After all, they are trying. I turned and left the room without saying another word. Trying to make sense of what had happened, I headed to the hotel bar and ordered a heavy drink. Hours went by. My phone was vibrating, and I chose to ignore the never-ending barrage of missed calls and messages. When I eventually returned to our flat, it was already midnight. M was pacing the living room while she waited to wake up. Hours passed while we argued. M insisted that I should at least attempt to make amends because family was vital. How he could be so oblivious to the suffering they had inflicted upon me was beyond me. We were clearly at a standstill as the night went on. I need some time, I responded at last. I'll be spending a few days with a friend. I must think. The days that followed were a haze. I ignored me and my family's calls and texts and stayed with my best pal. I needed time to reflect and determine my true desires. The more I considered it, the more I saw how deeply M's actions had damaged my faith in him. I eventually consented to meet with M 3 days prior to the wedding. A calm cafe where we had gone on our first date years prior served as a neutral setting for our meeting. I didn't miss the irony. M appeared awful. He appeared to have aged years in a matter of days, and there were dark circles under his eyes. I was still angry and hurt, but I also felt bad for putting him through this. He started, "I'm sorry," as soon as I took a seat. "I ought not to have pressured you to make amends with your relatives. I was mistaken." Hours passed while we recapped past exchanges and upsetting experiences. Ultimately, we reached a decision that felt necessary but shattered my heart. M whispered, "I think we need to postpone the wedding. We clearly have some issues we need to work through." With a mixture of relief and regret, I nodded. "I think that's for the best." We came away from the cafe with a rough plan. We would separate for a month, avoid communication, and give our desires some serious thought. We would then get together once more to determine whether to proceed with the wedding or, well, we didn't want to consider the other option. I began making calls the following day. I informed our vendors that the wedding would have to be postponed indefinitely. Although we lost some deposits, most were understanding. I communicated with our visitors by sending out a general email outlining the circumstances in ambiguous language. Then there was quiet. Like an unending desert, the month without communication stretched out in front of me. To distract myself from the uncertainties of my relationship, I immersed myself into my work and picked up new interests. I initially incessantly checked my phone, half hoping, partly expecting to find a message from M. However, I noticed that I was checking less and less as the days stretched into weeks. During our connection, I began to rediscover aspects of myself that I had previously allowed to slip away. I started painting again, got back in touch with old acquaintances, and even went to the beach for a weekend by myself. I experienced a mixture of dread and excitement as the month's end drew near. Another part of me, which was getting stronger every day, questioned if perhaps this separation was for the best, but I still wanted to see him again to see if we could salvage what we had. I received a call from an unknown number the day before our scheduled meeting. I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years when I responded. The shaky voice of my sister. "Please, don't get married to Emu." Suddenly, my world began to shift on its axis once more. However, that is a tale for a future update. I apologize for leaving you waiting, but I need time to think about what transpired next. I appreciate everyone listening and helping me get through this nightmare. I will return soon with additional details about the story. Update 2. My previous update was almost 11 months ago. I'm sorry for the extended silence, but I needed time to take it all in. I appreciate your support and patience, everyone. My estranged sister had just given me a startling phone call urging me not to marry M when I left off. From there, however, things only became more difficult. I met M the following day as scheduled after that enigmatic call. I knew something was seriously wrong the moment I laid eyes on him. He had black circles under his eyes and appeared gaunt. I was about to respond when he suddenly exclaimed, "I made a terrible mistake." My heart fell. My world was shattered by his next statement. With his voice hardly audible above a whisper, he admitted, I married your sister." I briefly believed I had misheard him. How was it possible for him to wed my sister? Only a month has passed since our separation. I experienced a wave of nausea as the reality set in. M then told me an absurd story that sounded like the storyline of a poorly written soap opera. My family apparently persuaded M to listen to them after I left that day. They told him stories about my early years, portraying my sister as the victim and myself as the troublemaker. What's the worst? He took them at face value. I felt offended and bewildered. "Your family seemed so sincere and I thought maybe I didn't have the full picture," M attempted to clarify. I made a foolish choice. My sister and parents had hatched a complex scheme. To avoid being made fun of by his family, they proposed that M wed my sister for the ceremony. After the commotion subsided, they could have the marriage dissolved or divorced. Despite the absurdity of the proposition, M had somehow consented while he was confused and being manipulated. Stunned into stillness, I sat. I was so deeply and profoundly betrayed that I was at a loss for words to describe how angry and heartbroken I was. I got up at last. "I never want to see you again," I stated in a remarkably composed tone. "You, my sister, my parents. You're all dead to me now." The weeks that followed were a jumble of suffering, rage, and incredulity. Unable to face the world, I took a leave of absence from my job. Despite the support of my friends, I was distraught. During this depressing time, M's mother called me out of the blue. Something compelled me to answer the phone even though I didn't want to at first. "Please," she said in a tearful voice. "I must see you. You must be aware of something." I agreed to meet her against my better judgment. At a little park close to my place, we first met. Her eyes were red from sobbing, and she looked terrible. She disclosed the whole scope of what had happened. M had been duped by my family, who had played on his fears and fed him tales about my background. They had persuaded him that I was unstable and that I had fabricated tales about my family in the past. But why would he believe them over me? Still having trouble understanding, I asked. Tragically, she shook her head. He had a susceptible condition. Your relatives took advantage of the fact that your abrupt departure had unsettled him. She clarified that M's family had opposed the hurried union with my sister. Despite their attempts to dissuade him, M had carried out the plan while in a confused and manipulated state. "And now?" I inquired, fearing the response. "Your sister won't get a divorce from him. By threatening to demand a large amount of alimony if he attempts to leave her, she has been dragging the marriage along." However, the disclosures did not end there. She informed me that my sister had told them the truth about everything a few days prior while intoxicated. She acknowledged that all they had told him about me was false and that they had trapped him. She even came clean about the essay that had been taken all those years ago. Her words, "M has been devastated since then. He'd like to speak with you. He claims that he made the most significant error of his life and is unsure of how he would ever be able to apologize. Perhaps you can speak and decide what to do next, he hopes." With my head spinning from all this new knowledge, I gazed at her. I felt somewhat vindicated because the truth had finally surfaced. However, a greater portion of me was just worn out. "Well," I answered in a stern tone. "Thank you for sharing all of this with me, but M and I are no longer a we." He decided. Regardless of their marital status, he is now my sister's husband. I refused to interfere or assist him in getting out of this situation. When I said this, she sobbed and begged me to change my mind, but I refused. Telling her, "My decision is final. I've moved on from that phase of my life. I'm unable to reopen those wounds." She texted me several times over the course of the following few days, urging me to speak with M, but I didn't reply. All of this was too much for me to handle anymore. I thought a lot about everything that had happened, including the life I had nearly committed to, the man I thought I knew who had deceived me so profoundly, and the family that had never really welcomed me. And I came to the crucial realization that I was stronger than everything. At that moment, I decided to use my experience as a springboard rather than a setback. I had been granted another opportunity to live my life as I had always desired, free from the burdens of my past. With fresh energy, I pushed myself back into my work. In order to resolve my trust difficulties and the residual pain from my family's betrayal, I began therapy. I became closer to my pals and was even more grateful for the family I had chosen for myself. And what do you know, things improved. It wasn't always easy, and on some days I felt like the hurt and rage would get the better of me, but I gradually began to recover. I can state with confidence that I'm in a better place than I've ever been after 10 months. I've taken up new interests, gotten promoted at work, and even resumed dating, albeit informally and much more cautiously. Ever since that day in the park with M's mother, I haven't heard from M or my family. I'm thankful they're no longer in my life, but occasionally I wonder what happened to them. They are responsible for the repercussions of their own acts. I want all of you out there who may be experiencing anything similar to know that things get better. You are stronger than you realize, even though it may not feel like it right now. Never allow a friend, family member, or romantic partner to make you feel less valuable than you actually are. Once again, I want to thank everyone for their support along this trip. This is going to be my last update on the matter. This chapter of my life is coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to many more joyful ones. Cheers to fresh starts, selected families, and the inner strength we discover when we need it most. Parents pressured me to forgive my brother for his affair with my ex-wife and her pregnancy. Then demanded I support them financially. My wife, Amy, 26F, cheated on me with my brother, Jake, 26M, which is why I, 34M, recently got divorced. My family did choose them over me, and yes, that did happen. But karma had other ideas. To help you see how my entire life culminated in this awful betrayal, let me begin from the beginning. Jake, who was born when I was 8 years old, was always the golden child while I was growing up in suburban Boston. In the eyes of our parents, Robert, 58M, and Sarah, 56F, I seemed to vanish. Although they weren't particularly nasty, I was undoubtedly treated as an afterthought. This reality was pounded home to us during our entire upbringing. I can still clearly recall winning my first science fair in 6th grade. I devoted months to creating a functional model of solar system dynamics, replete with orbital calculations and revolving planets. I received first prize and a special commendation for mathematical precision from the judges. Jake had a t-ball practice. Not even a game, just practice. So my parents didn't attend the ceremony at all. The walls of our living room were covered with Jake's participation ribbons, while my award remained unopened on the mantle for a week before vanishing into the basement. Our entire childhood was shaped by that. Jake's C+ grades were celebrated, but my straight A's were met with distracted nods. My mother first expressed concern that Jake could feel bad about his regular classes as a result of my enrollment in the advanced placement program. Jake received a new automobile for his 16th birthday to help build his confidence, according to Dad, whereas I had to start working part-time at 16 in order to earn money for college and buy my own clothes. Graduating from high school was very difficult. Instead of seeing me get my graduation and give my valedictorian address, my parents spent most of the ceremony photographing Jake playing in the stands when he was just 10 years old. Jake was whining about being bored, so they didn't hear me announce my MIT scholarship. A celebration dinner for Jake's early baseball season was transformed into a party. Because Jake seems a little down about all your achievements, Mom even encouraged me to tone down my presentation of my college intentions. I scarcely noticed that I had been accepted to MIT on a partial scholarship because Jake had recently made the junior baseball team. "That's nice, honey, but did you hear Jake might make a starting pitcher next season?" Mom said. I recall. I came to the realization that nothing I ever did would be sufficient at that point. I served as the practice child, the test subject for Jake, their actual parenting endeavor. With my scholarship, the money I saved from 3 part-time jobs, and the resolve to never look back, I set out for MIT at the age of 18. Jake had a summer league game the day I moved into my dorm, so my parents left early. They didn't even assist me with unpacking. Those were life-changing college years. I was evaluated entirely on my own merits for the first time. Upon discovering my aptitude for software architecture, I immersed myself in computer science and finished with honors. Several IT organizations were interested in my distributed systems optimization undergraduate thesis, and by the time I graduated I had received 5 job offers. A part of me still hoped that things may improve, so I picked a promising company in Boston. In part because it was near home. I was in charge of my own development team within 2 years, and by the 5th year, I was the youngest senior developer in the company's history. My folks were too busy assisting Jake with his 3rd college major change to really understand what I did for a job. 4 years ago at a tiny coffee shop close to my workplace, the real turning point in my life occurred. Amy and I met there. While completing her teaching degree, she was working as a barista. She somehow managed to recall each regular's order as well as a personal characteristic. She acknowledged that she had been writing encouraging notes on my coffee cups for weeks before she eventually consented to go out with me. I hadn't even noticed because I had been so focused on my task. 6 hours were spent on our first date. We discussed everything, including our families, anxieties, and dreams. She seems to genuinely get my family's problems. When I informed her about my early years, she responded, "They're blind. They have no idea what they were missing." I felt like I was being seen for the first time. The following year seemed unreal. We prepared extravagant meals together, spent weekends discovering Boston's hidden bookstores, and went trekking in New Hampshire. She pushed me to go for a big promotion at work, helped me get ready for the interviews, and celebrated my success more than anybody else. She shed joyful tears when I asked her to marry me after 14 months, saying she had been hoping I would. At the time, I believed our wedding was tiny and ideal. When my family arrived, they talked about Jake's new job opportunity in California for the whole of the reception. In order to show everyone a text message from Jake regarding his second interview, Mom actually cut short Amy's father's toast. In hindsight, I should have recognized it as a warning flag, but Amy dismissed it with a laugh, stating that she thought their commitment to Jake was sweet. Our marriage was everything I could have imagined for 3 years. We began discussing starting a family, acquired a lovely condo in Cambridge, and took trips when we could. Amy made our house feel like the cozy, caring home I never had as a child by decorating it with pictures of our travels and planting a little container garden on our balcony. "We were a team," she constantly asserted. She would remark, "Us against the world." Then Jake got in touch last year. After failing to succeed in California due to the startup culture not being his vibe, he returned to Boston. He wrote me a lengthy email in which he expressed his longing for his older brother and his desire to mend our relationship after growing up. He wrote, "Families should stick together." After a week of contemplation, Amy urged me to give him a chance. "People evolve," she stated. "Perhaps they've come to terms with their losses." I decided to go out to supper with Jake against my better judgment. Although awkward, the first meeting showed promise. Jake seems to have grown up and become more self-aware. He stated he wanted to make atonement and acknowledged that he had had it easy as a child. A week later, I introduced him to Amy, and they clicked right away. Too well, as I would learn later. Everything appeared to be ideal at first. A couple of times a week, Jake would stop by for dinner. He seemed genuinely interested in my work, brought wine and entertained us with tales of his exploits in California. He even stood up for me when our parents began showing their customary partiality at Sunday dinners. In fact, I began to think that we might be biological brothers. Subtly, however, things began to change. Jake started unexpectedly visiting our home, sometimes while I was still at work. While she graded papers, Amy stated they were simply hanging out and that it was good to have company. He would remain for supper and use my coffee mug while chatting with my wife and making inside jokes. I chose to overlook the warning signs, which included their sudden silence when I walked into a room, Amy's phone abruptly turning to the side when I sat next to her, their knowing glances at dinner, and their coincidental meetings at the coffee shop or grocery store. The announcement of the pregnancy followed. We were eating dinner at home. Naturally, Jake was present when Amy broke the news. Although I was ecstatic, Jake's response ought to have told me everything. He was not in the least bit surprised. Rather, he smiled with a knowing satisfaction that made my stomach flip. Jake was there all the time after that. He would talk about how active he would be in our child's life, touch Amy's stomach without asking, and make remarks about the baby's future. Despite my efforts to organize a romantic baby moon trip, hubby inadvertently invited himself. He said, "The baby needs both of us," and Amy concurred. I still remember the night I found out. I had been lying awake, mentally reliving months of dubious events. Amy was on the nightstand charging her phone while she slept peacefully next to me. I had never once looked at her phone in our 6 years together. I was a believer in trust and privacy. But I had a need to know something. They had hundreds of communications dating back 6 months. While I was at work, we had secret meetings in hotels. Plans for their future together. Conversations about the infant, their infant. Soon after he returned to my life, they had begun sharing a bed. They had intended to tell me after the baby was born, assuming that I would be too attached to the child to leave, therefore the pregnancy wasn't an accident. I felt my world come crashing down, message by message, as I read every single message till dawn. I was seated in our reading chair with Amy's phone in my hand when she woke up. She was immediately aware of what I had found. She sobbed, "We didn't intend for this to occur. Jake and I simply clicked. He knows me better than you ever could." In fact, she spoke the most overused phrase in the history of affairs. "We were going to tell you, but we didn't want to worry you after I became pregnant." I called my parents that morning in the hopes that they would finally support me. I was astounded by their answer. Mom said, "Jake made a mistake, but he's going to be a father now. You must forgive him and act like the bigger person. Consider the infant. Consider the grandchild that was produced when their younger son was having an affair with the wife of their older son. They were also protecting him. Once more. There are some things that never change." That day, I called a divorce attorney and checked into a hotel. Amy took turns pleading for my pardon and condemning me for deserting our family. At work, Jake attempted to corner me by claiming that we needed to have a man-to-man conversation. I reported him for workplace harassment and had security escort him out. Going through a divorce was a nightmare. Amy and Jake claimed their affair started because of my emotional unavailability, portraying me as domineering and emotionally abusive. According to my parents' testimony, I had always been difficult, and had lifelong jealousy of Jake. Mom even blamed the mediator for the entire problem, saying that I should have been more considerate of Jake's demands. After that, I stopped negotiating. After we went to court, Amy managed to get a respectable settlement. It seems that in Massachusetts, having an affair with your husband's brother does not waive alimony. Small successes though, like preserving the condo and the majority of my pay. I am currently 34 years old, divorced and totally estranged from my family. I've changed my email, blacklisted their numbers, and told building security to never let them in. On certain days I find myself questioning whether there is any way I could have avoided this. If I'd been a better spouse, brother or son. However, I later realized that I wasn't the one who deceived everyone. Turning family against family was not something I did. It's said that everyone eventually experiences karma. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I do know that I'm sick of being the family's scapegoat. Having to be understanding when everyone else gets away with ruining lives is something I'm tired of. I've lived my entire life as the one who is passed over, the second best option, and the afterthought. No more. However, just when I believed that things couldn't get much worse, they were about to get even more bizarre. Update 1. I assumed my family would finally leave me alone when I stopped communicating with them after the divorce. About a month has passed since everything happened, and I've been making an effort to concentrate on getting better and moving on. However, it seems that they had different ideas. When our office receptionist messaged me yesterday morning while I was in the middle of an important meeting with my development team, she said that my mother, Sarah, was in the lobby and insisted on seeing me. She reportedly spent more than an hour there, telling everyone she just needed to talk to her son. Since my team had seen Jake's prior incident at work, they could tell how uneasy I was. After ignoring her and carrying on with my job, my phone began to ring with calls from unidentified numbers. It seems that my mother had enlisted a number of family members to attempt to contact me. I thought it might be work-related when I finally answered one phone, but it was my Aunt Linda, 54F, with whom I hadn't spoken in years. Not even bothering to say hello, she began, "Your brother and Amy are really struggling. Jake still hasn't found a job, and the settlement money is running low. Well, no one wants to hire him after that. Jake's reputation appears to have been ruined by his affair with Amy, which somehow made its way into his professional network. After doing background checks, a number of prospective employers withdrew their offers. I couldn't help but notice the irony. For once, his actions had tangible repercussions. This is where it becomes ridiculous though. In addition to purchasing groceries and paying their rent, my parents have also been paying for Amy's prenatal medical expenses. My father's retirement funds are being depleted and they are now in a panic as they run out of money themselves. Their remedy? They want me to provide financial assistance for the woman who deceived me and the brother who ruined my marriage. My mother didn't just show up at my office, she had a plan. She chose to ambush me at work since she knew I wouldn't return their calls. After threatening to stay until closing time, she launched into a prepared speech on forgiveness and family responsibilities when I eventually made my way down to the lobby to handle the problem. She easily forgot that I had to pay for my own college education when she remarked, "Your father and I have always provided for both our sons. It's time for you to take charge and support your brother during this difficult time." What I was hearing was unbelievable. A rough patch. My wife became pregnant after he had an affair with her, and he attempted to claim the child as his own. That is a purposeful set of decisions, not a tough stretch. She foolishly responded, "Well, if you had paid more attention to Amy's needs." Before I phoned security, I interrupted her and urged her to go. I loudly announced in the lobby that I was leaving my own brother and his unborn child behind before she left. Despite their support, a number of my co-workers found this to be humiliating. Jake sent me an email later that evening. In order to get around my blocks, he had made a new account. Half-hearted apologies and barely disguised requests for financial assistance were mixed together in the email. He wrote about the difficulties Amy was having with her pregnancy, something I was unaware of, how they were unable to pay for appropriate medical treatment and how the stress was impacting my future nephew or niece. The attachment, a sonogram image, was what truly drew my attention, even though the manipulation techniques were clear. They were attacking me emotionally with their unborn child, the result of their affair. In an attempt to take a new tack, my father arrived at my apartment complex the following day and pretended to be there only to talk. I declined to let him in when the front desk called. Then for 2 hours, he stood in the lobby telling everyone who would listen how his successful son was causing his brother's family to suffer. Since then, I've had to inform the management of my building of the circumstances and ask them to bar any of my family members from entering. I don't see any other choice, even though it's awkward to publicly discuss my private issues in this way. Additionally, the harassment has spread to social media. On Facebook, Amy has been making vague accusations against me, claiming that she was abandoned throughout her pregnancy by her emotionally unavailable husband. Adding his own remarks about how some people need to step up and take responsibility, Jake has been reposting these posts. He seems to be unaware of the irony of discussing responsibility while pleading for freebies. I find it infuriating how they have twisted this story. They portray me as the bad guy since I didn't provide for the folks who deceived me. They seem to believe that I have a duty to save them from their own mess, simply because I'm succeeding professionally. I've started keeping a record of everything, including emails, problems at work, and posts on social media. According to my lawyer, if they try anything legal, we could need it. She is especially worried that they would attempt to use the legal system to obtain more support. The worst thing? I've received messages from certain family friends and distant relatives encouraging me to put family first and be the bigger person. They don't seem to realize that Jake and Amy ruined my last remnant of a family. Even though I'm steadfast in my resolve to not assist them, the persistent harassment is wearing me down. To cope with all of this, I've been seeing a therapist, and I'm thinking of searching for a new job in a different place. Although I don't like the idea of fleeing, I'm at a loss on what to do to find serenity. My own family has descended to a level I never imagined, but here we are. They are not merely pleading for assistance, they are attempting to intimidate and coerce me into giving money to the same individuals who ruined my life. I get a feeling that this isn't over yet. Desperate people do desperate things, and they're growing desperate. Update 2. Suddenly, my former partner's attorney sent me a notice. Jake and Amy were trying to sue me for further support, citing increased medical needs and changed circumstances. My lawyer, who had been recording all of their harassment incidents, was enraged but ready. Last week was the scheduled court date. It was unreal to enter that courtroom. Amy was dressed to highlight her obvious pregnancy. Our parents sat directly behind them, looking smugly arrogant, while Jake sat behind her in our father's old suit. First up was their lawyer, who told a story that almost made me chuckle. They claimed that because they had undervalued the emotional toll of the divorce, the initial payment was insufficient. They said that my pattern of workplace harassment had prevented Jake from finding a job and even implied that the stress caused by my vindictive behavior was putting Amy's pregnancy in jeopardy because it allegedly required specialized care because of high-risk issues. The way my lawyer responded was heartbreaking. She started by playing surveillance tape from my office building, which included my mother's theatrical displays, Jake's violent conduct, and Amy's attempts to enter through the rear door. She then presented social media evidence, including a detailed chronology of their campaign of online abuse. Their financial records were the true surprise. Jake had rejected multiple jobs as being beneath him, not because he was having trouble finding employment as a result of my pestering. For the court's pity, Amy had turned down a full-time teaching job in order to keep her jobless, pregnant woman status. Amy's prenatal records, which revealed a perfectly healthy pregnancy with typical expenses, were the most incriminating of all. They had been playing pawn with their unborn child. The judge was clearly upset. The judge interrupted their attorney when he attempted to explain that emotional discomfort warranted more help. Your client seemed to have committed perjury, counselor. Do you want to keep going in this direction? Their lawyer returned with a somber expression after a short break. Jake was pale, Amy was crying, and their united front had fallen apart. I was pleasantly surprised by the judge's decision. In addition to rejecting their motion, he also lowered my alimony payments by 60%. Parties who misuse the legal system are not viewed favorably by this court, he said. Mr. Smith seems to be the victim of a well-planned scheme to exploit him financially and emotionally. The fallout happened quickly. Amy decided she could work after Jake unexpectedly landed a job in retail. In their final message, my parents accused me of destroying Jake's last chance and assured me that they would never forgive me for abandoning my family. Citing irreconcilable differences regarding truthfulness, their attorney resigned from their representation. My organization increased security and barred them from the property. I learned that my parents had taken out a second mortgage to pay for legal bills, and that Jake and Amy were arguing over money all the time via common acquaintances. Finally, I feel like I can breathe. I can rebuild my savings thanks to the lower expenses, and I'm thinking about accepting a job offer in Seattle. Letting someone suffer the repercussions of their actions is sometimes the finest form of retaliation. However, I have a feeling that this story is far from over. Update 3. I want to start by thanking this community. I have remained strong during this entire fiasco thanks to your support and remarks. Here is what may be my story's last update. Aunt Linda, the sister of my father, unexpectedly contacted me a few weeks after the court triumph. I was interested enough to listen to her because she has never been involved in family conflict. A huge error. Trying to seem worried, she began, "Your father isn't getting any younger. His health is suffering as a result of all this stress." She continued by talking about how my parents would lose their retirement funds, how they had to refinance their home to pay for Jake and Amy's expenditures, and how families should stick together no matter what. She changed strategies when I didn't react with pity right away. Did you realize that every night your mother sobs herself to sleep? Even though they may have acted inappropriately against you as a child, they are still your parents. Jake remains your brother despite everything that has transpired. At last, I cut her off. What took place? Are you referring to the months he spent having sex with my wife, getting her pregnant and then attempting to claim the child as his own? That's what took place? I was astounded by her response. Well, perhaps you could have been more involved in your marriage. In fact, she attempted to place the blame for their affair on me, claiming that my jealousy of Jake as a child had produced a toxic environment that pushed them together. It was so ridiculous I laughed, really laughed. Another member of the family was attempting to deceive me into taking accountability for Jake and Amy's behavior. What's different this time? It didn't move me at all. Linda, I asked, why don't you assist them if you're so worried about their financial status? Your husband's legal practice is doing well, and you possess 3 rental properties. Why am I the only one who is supposed to stand by them? That was different, she sputtered, adding that I had a special obligation as Jake's brother. She said she didn't want to take sides when I asked her why she hadn't stepped in during all of this. But now you're picking sides, I said. You decided to come to me and demand that I pay for their consequences rather than admit the harm they caused. She then revealed what she believed to be her secret weapon. Your father is thinking of retiring early because of stress. The house may need to be sold. Is seeing your folks lose everything because you're too proud to assist what you want? I said, no, Linda. They're losing everything as a result of their decision to condone Jake's actions once more. They, like Jake and Amy, are paying the price for their own decisions. And what do you know? I'm not responsible for fixing that. When I'm older and alone. Family is all we have in the end, she emphasized, threatening that I will regret this. No, I replied. Self-respect is all we have in the end, and I'm finally choosing to keep mine. In addition to blocking her number, I hung up. Her call, however, had the unanticipated benefit of providing me with clarity. I felt truly free for the first time from the obligation and guilt that had plagued me since I was a young child. I accepted the Seattle job offer later that day. The change of location feels appropriate, and the firm is providing a substantial promotion. I'm starting over and selling the condo. Yesterday, my coworkers threw me a farewell party. I learned what true support looks like from these individuals, who supported me during the darkest months of my life. With the straightforward statement, your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see it, my closest colleague gave me a card that was signed by everyone. I've discovered that family is about mutual support, respect and trust rather than blood. The friends who supported me, the coworkers who shielded me, and ultimately, myself, proved to be my true family. I'm done, to my parents, Jake, Amy, and now Linda. Your decisions brought you to this point, and you are responsible for the results. I'm not available to be your ATM or your scapegoat anymore. For my part, I'm excited for my new life in Seattle. I'm thrilled about the initiatives that await me at my company's renowned West Coast location. More significantly, I can't wait to create a life in which I'm respected for who I am rather than compared to someone else's golden child. Writing my last post from an empty condo, surrounded by stacked boxes, seems oddly appropriate. I start driving west tomorrow. I'll be looking back on my past life, with all of its suffering and familial strife. Yes, their baby was born last week, in case you were wondering. No, I haven't contacted anyone or seen any pictures. I've closed that chapter of my life. Again, I want to thank Reddit for supporting me over this trip. When I was having self-doubt, your encouragement and counsel kept me going. Anyone going through a similar situation should know that their value transcends their family's treatment of them. Walking away is sometimes the most self-loving thing you can do. It's time to go, cheers to fresh starts. I was abandoned by my family due to my golden sister's success, now she's begging for help as the family business falls apart. Hello Reddit, I, 32F, never imagined that I would be sharing my entire being online, but here I am. My life was completely upended in a way I never anticipated. I was expelled from the house by my parents. And why? Because I managed to pay for my MBA without their invaluable assistance, and my sister, 36F, the golden child, couldn't tolerate it. Although it's a lengthy tale, I need to vent and perhaps you guys might provide some guidance or simply a virtual shoulder to weep on. Allow me to illustrate the dynamics of my family for you. I've always been the underdog, the last in line, and the one who never quite fits in. It was obvious from the beginning that my sister was the favorite growing up in a suburban community just outside of Chicago. My folks would hold a parade if she received an A. It was like, oh cool, what's for dinner? If I received an A. You understand. Sarah, my sister, was always the center of attention. She seemed to do better at everything without really trying, and she was more attractive and gregarious. School plays? She took the lead. Captain of a sports team? Naturally. Grades? Perfect scores. I was the awkward bookish kid who didn't want to be in the spotlight and would rather sit in my room and code. My parents were enamored with Sarah as if she were a prodigy when she enrolled in a prestigious business school. They covered everything, including her tuition, fashionable clothes, her apartment in a fancy area of town, and even her excursions to Cancun over spring break. They were often boasting to anyone who will listen about their successful daughter because they were so proud of her. I kept my head down and assumed I would have to handle things alone in the interim. Despite taking out loans and working part-time jobs during my time in college, I was still able to earn honors in computer science. But was there a celebration for me? No, my mother just said, "Dear, that's nice. Have you looked at the pictures from Sarah's graduation? Wasn't she beautiful?" In the present, I have spent the last few years managing projects for a digital company. Although it pays the bills and is a fine job, I'm looking for more. One day, I hope to launch my own business, rise in my job, or even get into top management. I therefore made the decision to apply to a respectable university's MBA program. The catch? The cost of tuition is extremely high, 6 figures to be exact. I had the hope that my parents might lend me some support. After all, they funded Sarah's whole schooling, right? After a family supper one evening, I sat them down and, to my astonishment, the topic of conversation revolved around Sarah's most recent achievement at the family restaurant. I outlined my strategy, gave them an overview of the school, described how it would advance my career, and then tactfully brought up the topic of tuition. The expressions on their faces. It would seem as though I had asked them to sell their kidneys or something. They informed me outright that they couldn't pay my tuition, which is fine. I understand that MBAs are costly. But the fact that they refused to even co-sign a loan was what really infuriated me. I only wanted their assistance so I wouldn't be drowning in debt for the rest of my life, not to pay for everything. Their logic. We have already covered Sarah's tuition. Now is the time to consider our future. The worst part is that they also intended to grow the family restaurant. It seemed like they were investing all of their savings in that. What I was hearing was unbelievable. So you could afford Sarah's entire education, but you can't even co-sign a loan for me? Trying to speak steadily, I asked. Well, honey, Sarah's education was an investment in the family business, my mother boldly said. You have an MBA? That's only for you, isn't it? Only for me, as if I weren't related to them? As if they didn't care about my success? I was at a loss. My parents seemed to be putting unnecessary barriers in my path, but I didn't want to miss this chance. When it came to me, they had to be prudent and frugal, but they had no trouble spending a lot of money on Sarah. I had no choice but to ask my Aunt Margaret. Now, let me tell you that my dad's older sister, Aunt Margaret, is quite different from my parents. To be honest, she is far more successful than both of them and works as a neurosurgeon. She has always been nice to me though, and she's also quite grounded. There was always this strange tension between her and my parents. At family get-togethers, they would pretend to be courteous, but I could tell they were resentful of her success in comparison to their own. In particular, my dad detested feeling like he was overshadowed by her. When I was younger, I overheard arguments in which my dad accused Aunt Margaret of being conceited and defaming him. At first, I wasn't particularly interested in involving her, but I was desperate. One day, I contacted her to see whether she would be able to assist me with the tuition. I described the circumstances, my parents' refusal to assist, and the significance of this MBA to me. Aunt Margaret made no hesitation at all. "Of course I'll help," she said. "Why didn't you approach me earlier? It would be an honor for me to invest in your future because I've always believed you have a lot of promise." I felt so grateful, but I was also afraid my dad would find out. He would go crazy if he found out that I had approached his sister behind his back to request money. In order to keep it a secret, I pleaded with Aunt Margaret. Recognizing the complicated family dynamics at work, she concurred. After that, everything was well for a time. Since my tuition was paid for and I was preparing to begin my MBA school, I assumed I was safe. I felt both anxious and optimistic about the future. I felt like I was winning for once. Sarah made the decision to wreck everything at that point. I'm still not sure how she learned that I had asked Aunt Margaret for assistance. Perhaps she snooped through my emails when I wasn't looking, or perhaps she overheard a call. However, she did discover, and as the golden child that she is, she was unable to ignore it. She had to make it into a large, theatrical spectacle. After a long day at work, I was thrilled to share some news about my impending MBA orientation when I got home one evening. However, I could sense a problem as soon as I entered the room. The home was eerily silent, and the air felt heavy with stress. My heart fell as I walked to the living room. Everything I owned, including my books, clothes, and even my bedding, was put up in boxes. I felt as though the house was erasing me. Sarah was standing off to the side with this smug, self-satisfied expression on her face while my parents were seated on the couch, their emotions a mixture of disappointment and rage. I had the impression that I had entered a perverse intervention. My father wasted no time. "Explain this," he asked, tossing me a pile of papers. I picked up the papers with trembling hands, not understanding a word he was saying. I became aware that Sarah had completely lost her mind at that point. She had created these fictitious emails between Aunt Margaret and me, giving the impression that I was betraying the family. The emails gave the impression that I had given Aunt Margaret the trade secrets of our family restaurant in return for her covering my tuition. Recipes, supplier details, and even the restaurant's finances were discussed. I didn't really have access to any of these things, but Sarah did. My eyes were unbelievable. After looking through my laptop, Sarah discovered several emails that I had sent with Aunt Margaret, which she subsequently altered using Photoshop or some other program. She painted me as a traitor of some sort, as though I had betrayed our family. I was taken aback. "This isn't real." I stumbled my way out. "These emails are fraudulent, I would never do this." My parents, however, didn't even pay attention. My mom was crying as they stood there, and my dad was furious and red-faced. He said, "We trusted you, and you stabbed us in the back." They trusted Sarah, regardless of what I said. Since they obviously did. She was always believed by them. It felt as though I had vanished from the world and that all the years I had spent being a good daughter, working hard and never getting into trouble, were in vain. I knew then and there that I would always be second best in their eyes. They would always have doubts about me. My father said, "You must go," in a chilly tone. "We won't have a traitor in this house." I pleaded with them to think again. I made an effort to clarify the MBA and how Aunt Margaret was only assisting me, much like they had assisted Sarah. My parents didn't care, but I didn't want to burden Aunt Margaret, especially since she had already promised to cover my tuition. They claimed I was a traitor and refused to interact with me. Sarah simply stood there the entire time, her arrogant expression never changing. Her eyes said louder than words could. She had prevailed. The sister, whom she always viewed as a rival, was finally gone. That was it. I only had a few boxes of my belongings and the clothing on my back when I fled. I noticed the neighbors looking out their windows while I was loading my car, presumably curious about the drama. I felt totally alone, deceived and embarrassed. As soon as I was in my car, I called Aunt Margaret, crying so hard that I could not speak. Without asking any questions, she told me to come to her apartment right away. Without her, I'm not sure how I would have made it through. I'm currently residing at Aunt Margaret's home. With her offer of a place to stay and her assurance that she still wants to assist with my MBA, she has been a tremendous support system. Nevertheless, I vividly remember that night. Sarah standing there with that arrogant expression on her face, knowing she had won, my parents glaring at me like I was a criminal, and all of my belongings packed away when I walked into my house. I don't know. I'm not sure what to do, Reddit. A part of me wants to defend myself and show that Sarah was lying. If I looked closely enough, I could certainly find proof that the emails were forged, but I also want to break all connections and never look back. For those who are so eager to assume the worst of me, why should I fight? How can I possibly comprehend this betrayal? Given that my own family has abandoned me, how can I go on? In a few weeks, the MBA program will begin and I should be thrilled. However, I'm coping with this emotional trauma instead. I keep going over everything again in my mind, wondering if I missed any clues. Was Sarah this cunning all the time? Were my parents as eager to discard me all the time? After this, how can I ever trust anyone again? Aunt Margaret advises me to concentrate on the chances my MBA will present for my future. Although it's difficult to look past the hurt and rage in the moment, she claims that achievement is the best form of retaliation. I would appreciate any guidance. From here, how do I reconstruct my life? Given that my own sister would go to such extent to harm me, how do I handle this? And when I feel so damaged on the inside, how do I interact with my MBA program instructors and classmates? Here, I feel like I'm drowning. Give me a lifeline, Reddit, if you can. Update 1. It's been a long time, 3 years to be precise, Reddit. Since I last wrote about my family throwing me out, a lot has happened. I wanted to let you know how things have progressed. I started by finishing my MBA program, which had a profound impact on me. I was in a lot of mental upheaval when I first started, but I was able to focus all of that energy on my academics. I graduated at the top of my class, but it wasn't easy. The girl who constantly felt inferior is no longer there. She has been replaced with a lady who is confident in her abilities and doesn't hesitate to express them. I got a job at a prestigious consulting business after graduating. I love my job, but it's tough. I'm in a setting where my abilities and diligence are truly valued for the first time in my life. No more living in the shadow of others. During all of this, Aunt Margaret has been a rock. She's become the loving family I never had, not just a place to stay. We discuss everything from her most intriguing medical cases to my most recent professional endeavor during our weekly dinners. I've learned so much from her about defending my rights and appreciating my own worth. 3 years of radio silence about Sarah and my parents. No emails, texts, or phone calls. It was painful at first. However, as time went on, I came to see that their absence was enabling me to develop in ways that I could not have while living with them. I've created a proud life for myself, free from the need for approval and continual comparisons. However, life can be unpredictable. Last Saturday, just when I thought I had everything worked out, Sarah arrived at my door. I nearly failed to identify her. The air of superiority and the fancy attire vanished. She was wearing a basic sweater and jeans that had seen better days, and she had big circles under her eyes and her hair pulled up in a hurry. She looked discouraged. "Hey," she said in a little voice. "Can we talk?" Curiosity overcame my want to slam the door in her face. I opened the door for her. Sarah sat uncomfortably fidgeting on the couch. "I need your help," she blurted out at last. "The eatery is having problems. Serious problems. The family firm," she said, "was close to going bankrupt. Our parents' much anticipated large expansion had turned out to be a complete failure. They were drowning in debt because they had overextended themselves and took out large loans." When Sarah said, "Dad's talking about filing for bankruptcy," her voice broke. "Mom is in disarray, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Despite my best efforts, I am unable to resolve this." As I listened, I experienced a range of feelings. I had a sick sense of satisfaction. Wasn't this retribution for the way they handled me? However, I also experienced a twinge of, not quite pity, but a near feeling. "Why are you telling me this?" I inquired. "What do you expect me to do?" Sarah's eyes were filled with desperation as she gazed at me. "You're doing fantastically in your new work and with your MBA. I hope you may be able to assist, offer some guidance, or—" I understood what she was asking, but she didn't finish the phrase. She desired money. The black sheep is being rescued by the golden child. The irony was nearly unbearable. I said, "Let me get this straight," maintaining a calm voice. "After everything that happened, after 3 years of silence, you show up asking for help." Sarah was gracious enough to appear embarrassed. Quietly, "I know I messed up," she said. I felt envious. "All right. You were always so capable and intelligent. I lost it when I learned that Aunt Margaret was assisting you. I apologize." After 3 years, all she could do was apologize. It was dreadfully insufficient. "Sorry doesn't cut it, Sarah," I responded. "You have no idea what I've been through because of what you did." "I know," she responded, her eyes welling with tears. "But we're still related, aren't we? Family members support one another. Just give it some thought, please. Family." The word struck me hard. After everything that had transpired, were we still related? I informed Sarah that I needed some time to reflect. With a disappointed expression, she left her number and left. And now I'm here, attempting to decide what to do. On the one hand, I've put a lot of effort into creating this new life for myself. The familial drama, the incessant comparisons, and the sense of inadequacy have all finally left me. Is it really my intention to become entangled in all of it again? However, a tiny part of me still gives a damn. I feel something when I consider my parents' bankruptcy, not quite pity, but also not disinterest. However, there is a part of me that sees this as a chance to show them what they lost when they rejected me. To definitively demonstrate that I am not the failure they have always believed me to be. However, is it worthwhile? After the way they treated me, do I owe them anything? And would things truly change even if I did help? Or, regardless of what I do, would I always be the second best daughter? Reddit, I'm conflicted. How would you respond if I were you? Should I defend myself and let my family work out their own problems? Or should I assist them and run the danger of getting injured again? I've been thinking about it for the past few days, but I'm still not convinced. A part of me wants to step up, offer them a helping hand and pull them out of this mess. It might present an opportunity to re-establish our friendship on more equal terms. Another part of me, though, is screaming to go away. I'm still recovering from the profound damage they caused me. Would I truly want to expose myself to that suffering once more? Aunt Margaret and I have discussed it. As usual, she has been encouraging. telling me that she will support me no matter what. However, she cautioned me as well. Sometimes helping others means sacrificing yourself, she stated. Make sure you're not setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. I've been distracted recently, and my coworkers have noticed. Some have listened sympathetically, but I haven't told them the specifics. One of them stated, sometimes the most professional thing you can do is to keep your personal life separate from your work. That statement has stayed with me ever since. The MBA courses on crisis management and corporate turnarounds are still on my mind. It's likely that I could assist them and provide a strategy for escaping this situation. Should I though? Am I accountable? What about the apologies from Sarah? Is it sufficient? Is this just another ploy, or can I believe that she truly feels bad? I'm also concerned about how it might affect my personal financial security. Even though I'm doing well now, I'm not exactly making a ton of money. Assisting them might jeopardize my future ambitions. One thing is certain, this time, whatever I decide, it will be on my terms. I've changed from being that insecure, terrified girl. No matter what occurs with my family, I will always be a strong, accomplished woman who recognizes her value. What do you think, Reddit? Should I put my own health first and let my family deal with the fallout from their choices, or should I offer them assistance? I'd greatly benefit from an independent viewpoint on this. Update 2. It's me again, Reddit. Things have taken a crazy turn since my previous update, and I can't believe I'm back so quickly. Do you recall how I debated whether or not to assist my family with their restaurant problems? The cosmos, however, chose to give me still another surprise. My parents arrived at my workplace a week following Sarah's visit. You read correctly, my office. They just showed up in the lobby one afternoon after somehow figuring out where I work. Talk about a systemic shock. My assistant buzzed me while I was in the middle of a meeting to let me know that 2 people were requesting to see me. My heart almost stopped when she told me about them. Feeling as though I was walking to my own death, I excused myself from the meeting and proceeded to the lobby. My parents were there, looking older and more worn out than I had recalled. Dad's shoulders were hunched in a manner I had never seen before, and Mom's hair had turned fully gray. The weight of 3 years of stillness hung between us as we simply stared at one another for a minute. Dad finally stated, "We need to talk," in a rough yet oddly diminutive voice. I took them to a coffee shop nearby since I didn't want to have this discussion at work. An uneasy hush descended upon us as we sat down with our beverages. Determined not to make things easy for them, I waited for them to speak. Mom was the first to break. She added, "We were wrong," in a shaky voice. "We ought never to have expelled you. We ought to have paid attention to you. We sincerely apologize. Over the last 3 years I had dreamed of this moment countless times, but now that it was actually occurring, I felt nothing. There was only a hollow emptiness, no relief, no joy, not even rage." Dad added his voice. "You should return home. We can overcome this difficult period as a family once more." To give myself some time, I took a drink of my coffee. "Why now?" At last, I inquired. "Why after 3 years of silence?" After they looked at each other, I realized there was more to this tale. The depth of their desperation became evident as they started to explain. The restaurant was a total failure, not merely having financial difficulties. In addition to going overboard with the expansion, they had been taking shortcuts and breaching the law to stay afloat, including tax evasion, health code infractions, and even some dubious supplier transactions. They now faced possible criminal penalties in addition to bankruptcy. Dad said, "We need your help," in a voice that was just audible above a whisper. "Your business knowledge, your connections, you could save us?" Stunned, I sat there. My parents, who had dismissed me on false pretenses and had always viewed me as second best, now viewed me as their only hope. "Let me get this straight," I remarked, finding it difficult to maintain my composure. "You kicked me out, believed the worst of me without any proof, didn't contact me for 3 years, and now you want me to bail you out of your illegal activities?" Mom attempted to grasp my hand as she reached across the table. I retreated. With tears in her eyes, she continued, "We know we don't deserve your help. However, we remain family. We're at a loss on what to do, so please." Family. That word was used once more. However, as I observed them, I came to the realization that they were no longer members of my family. Aunt Margaret, a member of my family, had given me unwavering support. My family consisted of the friends I had established at work and in my MBA program who respected me for who I was. I inhaled deeply. I said, "I'm sorry," and I was surprised at how composed I felt. "But I am unable to assist you. What you're asking, money isn't the only factor. You're asking me to sacrifice all I've worked so hard to achieve, including my job and principles. I'm not capable of doing it. Their shocked expressions were nearly funny. They obviously didn't think I would say no. Anger colored Dad's face. After everything we've done for you, I interrupted him. What have you done for me? You mean denying me support for my education when you paid for Sarah's, excluding me on false pretenses and favoring her throughout my life? Now Mom was crying aloud. Please, sweetie, we'll lose everything. I experienced a little pang of guilt. Then I thought back on the previous 3 years, including the hardships, the suffering, and the development and accomplishments I had made on my own. I stood up and said, I'm sorry you're in this situation, but these are the results of your own actions. I am unable to save you. We'll be ruined, Dad yelled as I turned to go. Is it your preference? I stopped and turned to face them. I want you to accept responsibility for your actions, I stated. I want you to understand how much you lost when you threw me out. What I really want, though, is to be free of your drama and manipulation. I left my parents behind and left the coffee shop after that. I felt as though a burden had been lifted as I entered the street. I had finally chosen myself, set my boundaries, and confronted them. However, the tale doesn't stop there. I gave that confrontation a lot of thought. I came to the realization that merely leaving was insufficient. My parents' actions were unlawful, and if they persisted, others might suffer harm. I therefore had to make a tough choice. I reported what I learned about the restaurant's unlawful operations to the appropriate authorities, including the police, the IRS, and the health department. Although I knew it was the right decision, it wasn't an easy one. The consequences were severe and quick. Screaming and sobbing, Sarah called me and accused me of ruining the family. I don't know what grounds my parents believed they had, but they alternated between pleading for assistance and threatening legal action in their voicemails. But I didn't back down. I informed the authorities of what I knew and made it apparent that I was not involved in any unlawful activity. Aunt Margaret was there for me during the difficult few weeks, reassuring me that I was acting morally. Although the inquiry is still underway, the eatery has reportedly been closed while a thorough audit is conducted. Sarah and my parents are facing severe legal repercussions. Although it's not a joyful conclusion, it's a fair one. In my case, I'm doing all right, actually better than all right. With everything, there's a feeling of closure. The harmful family dynamics that hindered me for so long have now been broken. I have a successful career. I've even received an approach regarding a possible promotion. I feel like I've found a true professional home because of how supportive my coworkers have been during this process. I've never been closer to Aunt Margaret. After everything calms down, we're arranging a trip together, so we have something to look forward to after all this worry. I'm not going to act like it's been simple. There are times when I question whether I made the correct decision and feel bad. However, I know I made the correct decision when I think back on all the suffering they inflicted on me, including the years of manipulation and partiality. Here I am then. I felt confused and alone after being evicted from my house 3 years ago. I am now independent, prosperous in my work, surrounded by individuals who truly care about me, and at last free from my family's poisonous influence. Although some may have wished for a joyous family reunion, this is my tale, and I'm glad of the progress I've made. Remember this: if you're struggling with toxic family members or tough choices, you have the right to put your own health first. You are entitled to establish limits. Additionally, there are instances when the family you choose matters more than the one you were born into. I appreciate Reddit's support along this journey. You have no idea how much your guidance and assistance have meant. Cheers to fresh starts and making our own happiness.